Can we hear? Can you hear? Is this okay? It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. Okay. Let's. Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to receive you here. Some of you for the fifth time. We have been doing this the fifth session that we have done on this day on talking about energy, a topic that is every year is open, every year is a little bit different. And I want to start by thanking the hosting, the Betterman Foundation, that very generously invites us or let us use this beautiful setting, and all of you for coming. This is a moment of only a presentation, and I would like to offer the word to Albert Stein, which is the representative from the Commission. We do this in cooperation with the European Commission, and she would like to say a couple of nice words about, not to me, no, to the audience. The others, to me, you have said it earlier.
Bueno, me voy a dirigir a ustedes en...
I will first speak in English to you all. First of all, thank you very much for being here. I welcome you all, and it is a real pleasure, a real honor for me to welcome you together with Mr. Solana, who is the president of ISADE Geo. First of all, thank you on my behalf and on behalf of the European Commission for giving us the opportunity to organize this event together. And I would particularly like to thank Mr. Solana. Thank you, Javier. I think the organization of this event has been a real success. This is the second consecutive year that we collaborate with you, Javier. Last year it was a successful event, and we thought we should continue working together. And I think that having you all here today with us is a clear sign that we did the right thing. Actually, a couple of weeks ago, we saw that there were no free seats for everyone, so we had to close the registrations. Last year, we had the Commissioner for Climate and Energy, European Commissioner Miguel Arias Cañete, just a few days before the conference in Paris. And this year we have with us Gerassimos Thomas, who is the chairperson of European Fund for Strategic Investment and Deputy Director General for Energy from the European Commission. As you all know, only a few weeks ago, the Paris Agreement has entered into force, and only next week the European Commission will introduce a series of important suggestions called the Autumn Package, both legislative and non-legislative suggestions, to complement our approach on the energy union and a transition to a cleaner and cleaner energy, which is also sustainable. Undoubtedly, to us, to the European Commission, climate and energy are the two sides of the same coin. Of course, these are two important priorities of the European Commission, led by Mr. Juncker. A union of the resistant energy with a policy with regards to climate change, looking at the future, generating employment and growth. That is the best investment for the future of Europe and for the modernization of our economy. Thus, we believe that it is important that the European Commission is participating in events like this. And I think it is also important that you know what is the standpoint of the European Commission, that is, what the European Commission is actually considering. Therefore, we have the chance to meet and to know firsthand how we see from the European Commission the energy situation for the future, what are we suggesting and what are we doing to reach successfully the climate and energy agenda we have set. The determination and the commitment of the European Commission to reach, as I said, successfully these goals And I'm talking about environmental, social, and success in all other fields. Mr. Thomas will talk about the ensemble of proposals to be adopted next week, as I said, the so-called Smart and Clean package, which will include issues such as energy efficiency, renewable energies, the design of the energy market, and energy governance. You will also have the chance to hear about all these issues thanks to wonderful speakers. We will also hear from the business sphere and from the institution sphere. That's all I wanted to say. Once again, thank you very much for being here today, and I wish you all a very fruitful day. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, Arantzazu.
Thank you very much, Arantzazu.
We're going to continue cooperating with the Commission with us, to see if we can bring to a good start, which is European countries. Without any further ado, we are going to enter into the first panel. Two very sophisticated people that I'm sure are going to give us a very important view of the situation of the energy in Europe and the energy union, how it's evolving, etc. Now, both are known by you. One is Josué Nimas, the CEO of Repsol, which is an old friend and a very successful ex-politician and then a very successful entrepreneur now, CEO of the biggest company in energy in our country. And the other is going to be Jerónimo Thomas, which is a good friend of Spain. He's origin Greek, but he has been working with all the members of the Commission, the Spanish commissioners, which have been in history. He was the chief of cabinet of the Joaquín Almunia when he was a member of the Commission. He knows somebody very interesting for us, David Vergara, which you were also a good friend of him. He was very good friend and working with Pedro Solbes, so he's almost an Spaniard delegated to the Commission in disguise being a Greek. And now he's in charge of the Director General of Energy, and they are going to talk to us, as I said, global energy and Europe and the European Energy Union. I don't think we are going to this conference or these sessions in a very informal manner. Please participate. You are not coming here only to listen, but also to participate. Please do it. And without any further ado, I call Jerónimo and Josué to come here. Gracias, Alicia.
Gracias a ti.
No te doy un beso porque te pego.
No, tampoco. Okay, thank you.
Now, we are going to have Josué ready for about 20 minutes. Jerónimo for 20 minutes, then we open the debate. Okay? Everybody okay? Josu.
Thank you, Javier. First of all, you have to explain me the meaning of sophisticated, because I am a very primary and simple guy. So,
but you are a Basque. Basque country sophistication goes together.
Only in the culinary mean. Sorry, it's okay. So, thank you, Javier. Let me, first of all, thank Sade Gio and Javier Solana for this kind invitation to take part in this forum. Let me say that I think that's very important to have the opportunity to meet policymakers, business leaders, and the academia in order to discuss together, to have a common vision, or even to discuss about our differences in energy terms. So I think that is a very interesting and nice initiative. I mean, I'm going to try to explain over the last 20 minutes, mainly my intervention in around four main pillars. The first one, what is going to be the world in the future? Let me say that that is perhaps the most obscure part of my speech, because, I mean, forecasting the past is quite easy, but forecasting about the future is a bit more difficult. Secondly, I'm going to talk about the energy transition scenario. Perhaps it's the most acknowledged scenario that a main part of our society and the energy sector share in some way. In the third point, I'm going to try to talk about what's the role of energy companies in this transition scenario. I mean, I'm going to acknowledge that we are part of the problem, but let me say that we want to be also part of the solution. And in the fourth part, I'm going to try in some seconds to materialize all that in my own company, Repsol. So, talking about the world in the future, I mean, energy is at the very heart, at the very beginning of everything in our society. I mean, we need energy to promote growth, to promote development, to promote prosperity in our societies. It's a key element that is behind everything. So, I'm convinced that changing the world, all that is going to impact also the energy sector. What is going to happen with the world? Clearly speaking, that we could see some mega trends for the first one. We are going to have more global. Is a must, in my opinion. World is going to be more urban. Aging is going to be also a problem. I mean, we can't forget that by 2040, 2050, 70% of people is going to live in cities in the world. The emerging countries are going to have a larger weight in the world. I mean, by 2045, 2050, more than a half of the global GDP is going to be in Asia. Technology is always key, in my opinion. I can't forget my background. I'm a former researcher and people coming from technology, but the technology cycles, research and development cycles are getting shorter and shorter. So the disruption of technology is going to be higher in the coming world. And we also could see new patterns in terms of consumption. I mean, hybrid consumer is there. That means that consumers go either to premium products or to low cost. I mean, and in the middle is not going to be, a wide space. Consumerism is going to be a trend. Sharing economy, and at the same time, concerns about the lack of resources, environment, and so on are going to grow. So these mega trends, in my opinion, are going to shape the future of the world. I don't know, of course, what the speed of this process is going to be. What could we learn from our clients, the behavior of clients? Let me say that we see a trend where clients are more concerned about experiences. I mean, when I talk about experiences, I'm talking about image, beauty, leisure, travels, and so on, that about the possession of physical goods. I mean, cars, houses, mortgages, and so on, they are going to have perhaps less importance in the future. So, and at the same time, we see a concern about mainly in the new millennials and in the Z generation about the lack of resources, the efficient use of resources, and so on. And in my opinion, this trend is going to be there also in coming years. And talking about technology, I think that we are going to see, I mean, 4 coming disruptions in coming years. The first one is the electric car. Let me say that the electric car has still some restrictions in terms of the cost of batteries, that is still high. In terms of the whole cycle of the vehicle in terms of sustainability, we could talk about it later. But I'm convinced that technology is going to overcome and is going to cope with these problems in the future. So I think that it's going to be a part of the reality in the coming future. Self-driving car is also there, is going to be part of the future. And let me say that car makers are really concerned about that because it's going to change their business model in a full way. And I don't know if smart cities are going to be part of the reality tomorrow. I mean, I think that this trend is there, but let me say that the smart home is already there. When I'm talking about a smart home, I'm talking about domotics, I'm talking about the remote control of appliances and services, I'm talking about self-generation at home, I'm talking about the storage, and the concept of distributed energy is going to come along with this trend in the short future. So think about this mixture of artificial intelligence, engineering, genetics, robotics, all that mix and squeeze with nanotechnologies, 3D printing, advanced materials, and all that connected in our world of smartphones and so on. I mean, all that is going to transform our world. And we can think that energy is going to be out of that. I mean, all that is also to transform the energy sector, and we are going to be part of a different world in coming years. We could talk about some concerns about this world that is coming, but perhaps it's not the target of this meeting, but I am going to put on the table the reflection. First of all, what is going to happen with jobs in this world? My first concern and reflection. And the second one, who is going to pay taxes in this world? In which part of the chain value are going to be companies that are going to pay taxes? But that is another debate. I don't fear about competition. And let me say that I don't know who is going to be the winner in this world. I know that everybody is going to be in different sectors. I not even know who is going to be my competitor in coming years, in the sectors where we are. I'm talking about mobility, I'm talking about energy, and so on. I don't know that. But I think that the winners are going to be companies and people, first of all, able to think out of the box, open-minded, ready to see and capture opportunities, with the capacity to attract talent and people for their companies, and at the same time that they are going to be able to have flexible companies, very lean companies, lean processes, a low-cost structure, and being flexible to adapt themselves to the world is coming. So I'm convinced that these companies and these people are going to be the winner in this world, and let me say that I'm not fear about that, because I mean, competition is okay for our society. My second point is the energy transition scenario. I mean, all that is going to influence the energy sector. Let me say that perhaps we could have a bit more time than some other sectors like finance, telecoms, and so on. Why? Because perhaps we are a bit more protected. The first protection is that the inertia in our sectors is a bit higher. I mean, there is a technical reason for that. The time to renew a fleet of vehicles, for instance, is 10, 12, 14 years. That means that disruption needs perhaps 15 years to achieve a 50% or 60%. I'm not saying that all that is not going to happen. I'm saying that we have a bit more time than some other people, not more. Secondly, I mean, sometimes we have a perspective seen and looking at that from Europe. And Europe is very important. I believe deeply in Europe. But the emerging countries and the world is a different reality. And trends are not going to be the same everywhere. And third, because perhaps we have more influence from geopolitics than some other sectors. Key factors about the energy future or transition scenario. I mean, we are going to have in coming years more growth in the world, more energy demand, more population, 2 more billion people by 2040, 2050, more middle class, mainly in Asia, 3 billion more people in the middle class in Asia, we are going to have the concern and the fight against climate change, and we can't forget this part of the equation. I mean, I think that the COP21 was a very important and positive commitment. I'm talking as reference for a part of the world, a new policy scenario of the Energy International Agency, that the new energy scenario is mainly the new policy scenario based on the projects pledged by countries in COP21. And for Europe, I'm forecasting even let me say, a further scenario that could in some way fit with the 450 ppm scenario defined by the International Energy Agency. But perhaps we could have two different speeds in coming years in terms of cope with this problem that is really relevant, and we have to be active. Electrification is going to be or to increase its part of the pipe in coming years, technology, efficiency. I mean, they are going to be the trends in the world. Talking about geopolitics, it could be surprising, but if we take the projections of the International Energy Agency, we could see that from 2023, 2025, the non-OPEC countries achieve the peak oil production, not the OPEC countries. That means that it could be curious, but perhaps from 2020, 2025 on, the OPEC could have a more relevant role that it has even today in energy terms. But I mean, we could discuss about that because it's not a fact. It's some kind of intuition. Saudi Arabia and Iran are going to be key. We could see there the fiscal deficit that these countries need in oil price terms to break even their fiscal deficit. I mean, I don't know what is going to happen, but we have to analyze this figure in a particular way. And from the other hand, from the demand side, China and India are going to be really relevant in terms of growth and increase of demand. Let me say that by 2040, 50% of the oil imports in the world are going to go to China and to India. And taking into account the origins of this oil, mainly going through the Straits of Hormuz and Malacca, that are going to be the real choke points in energy terms, that means that any lack of stability in these areas could impact the energy war. Talking about gas, some words only. In the geopolitics of gas, we are going to have two competition play fields among the pipe gas and the LNG. In the Atlantic side, the Russian gas, mainly by pipe towards Europe, is going to compete with the American one, LNG. In the Pacific Basin, the Russian gas, LNG plus pipe towards Asia, is going to compete with Australia, Qatar, and some other areas like Mozambique, LNG. The gas price is going to depend on the current oversupply in terms of LNG in the world, the domestic price of Henry Hub in North America, the speed of the shifting from coal to gas in some geographical areas, and so on. I'm not going to talk about geopolitics of renewable because it's another debate. I mean, it's interesting, but we could think about the rare earths problem concentrated in China, lithium in Bolivia and Chile. I mean, don't think that renewable energy is going to finish with or to put the end to the problem of geopolitics complication. So competition about sources or between sources is going to be there. To fulfill all this energy demand, we need every energy source. I mean, oil, gas, renewable, and so on. I think that the most important part of the equation, in my opinion, is that taking these energies, we have to fulfill three main objectives. First of all, guaranteeing affordable energy, so the security of supply. Secondly, to have competitive energy. And thirdly, to be able to do that maintaining or even reducing the CO2 emission level in the world. So, and the oil, in some way, is going to have, let me say, two main protections. The first one is the increase in emerging countries in coming years. I mean, I don't see an oil demand global peak before 2030, 2035, 2040. I mean, it's going to depend on the speed of the process. And secondly, let me say, if we take the 450 ppm scenario of the International Energy Agency, I mean, 65% of the oil consumed that day has nothing to do with mobility. That means that we are talking about oil to produce materials, to produce polymers, to produce asphalts, to industrial application, and so on. So that is the first fact about oil. And in some way, I think that the oil industry and oil and gas industry has shown over the last years a capability to invent itself every some years. I mean, in technological terms, it's really fantastic what we have developed over the last years in terms of, it's really fantastic our capacity to reinvent ourselves, but I'm going to talk a bit later about that. Gas is going to increase its part of the pipe. Electricity growth is going to be there. I mean, renewable energy, distributed generation are going to be factors that are going to influence the electricity market. If we take Europe, I mean, in Europe, the picture could be a bit different in coming years. My perception is that perhaps we are going to be a bit closer to the 450 ppm scenario, to the new policies scenario in Europe by 2040, but who knows, but that is my personal opinion. That means that we are going to have an Europe with no demand growth, with a stronger renewable energy, with advanced mobility, and with a higher penetration and deeper penetration of the smart home. Talking about the role of energy companies, I mean, I think that we have shown a real talent as companies to survive and to cope with the technological and environmental problems we have had and we have experienced over the last time. But the problem and the challenge we have in our hands for coming years is a real interesting and challenging task. I mean, we have to be able to give energy to a growing population, to a growing middle class, and at the same time, we have to contain the level of our CO2 emissions. Over the last years, we have developed fracking technologies. We have been able to increase our production with really sophisticated technologies in the ultra-deep water area, squeezing the last barrel using really developed techniques, being able to dismantling platforms in a very efficient way, and so on. So our real challenge now is to be able to apply all this talent, all these capabilities, and all this technology to some other objectives and targets. I mean, the methane hydrates from the ocean, apply to big data to all our operations, including exploration, to put the end, for instance, to the uncertainty of exploration, that is one of the main costs we have in the oil and gas sector, to develop the carbon capture, use, and storage technology. I mean, we are today in Puerto Llano, very far from here. We are producing polymers, plastics, using CO2 as raw material, substituting propylene oxide to produce polyols and polyols as raw material of polyurethanes. So this technology is coming, and there are going to be ways to reduce the impact of CO2 emissions in the world. And we have really a sector that is very affected by regulation. That comparing with some other sectors, I mean, it could be quite tricky. But I'm not going to talk about policies of the past. I prefer to talk about good policies we need in the future. About the past, I'm only going to say that, for instance, I mean, I'm fully in favor of promoting renewable energy, but I think that we have to do that in an intelligent and efficient way. I mean, if you take what the Spanish consumer is paying for every ton of CO2 that we have got rid of, over the last years, we have paid more than 230 euros per every ton of CO2 we have reduced in our emission level for the use of renewable energy in our country. But talking about the present, I mean, now we are promoting immature technologies. I'm convinced that the electric car is going to be able to overcome and to cope with the problems it could have in terms of cost, batteries, and so on. But today, if we take the subsidy level, in average, we are putting on the table to promote electric vehicle, we are paying 1,800 euros per every CO2 ton we are reducing. Let me say that with the current prices of 5, 6 euros in the market of every ton of CO2, over the last 6 years, my own company has been able to reduce 3 million tons of emissions in our refineries, with zero cost for public policies, for taxpayer, and for consumer. I mean, to develop the same effort that Repsol has developed in order to reduce the CO2 emissions in our refineries, I mean, every CO2 molecule is exactly the same, we need to spend 5 million electric cars. And the cost for the taxpayer of this effort will be 65 billion euros. So, and we could talk about a strange paradox. What is happening in Germany? I mean, Germany is paying and putting on the table a lot of table to promote electric vehicle. But at the same time, the electricity to feed this electric vehicle is in a relevant part produced by burning coal. I mean, that is a strange paradox that is not clean, is not efficient, and has a huge cost for taxpayers. So my message is clear. I mean, we have to commit ourselves with the COP21 objectives. We have to commit ourselves with the target of reducing to contain in 2 degrees the temperature of the Earth. And we have every company and every sector to be able to pave the way to this objective in a professional and efficient way. And the only way I know to do that is establishing, defining, and putting a carbon price on the table. I don't know what is the level of this carbon price, 20, 25, 30 euros per ton, but be sure that putting for everybody worldwide a carbon price on the table, we have a common play field for everybody, and technologies and private sector could compete with no cost for consumers and no cost for taxpayers to reduce in a dramatic way the CO2 emissions we have on the table. So we don't need blah, blah, blah. We don't need, on behalf of being more green or greener than others to promote some kind of technologies. We need efficient policies, and we need put the market working, because I acknowledged at the beginning of this speech, I know that we are part of the problem, but we want to be part of the solution. And energy companies, the academia, research centers, even in Spain where we have magnificent research knowledge everywhere, we have the knowledge, we have the technology to cope with this problem. I'm going to put the end to my speech, Javier. Let me only say, I'm going to put 3 questions on the table. First of all, what level of energy cost do we want in our society? Secondly, what level of industrial competitiveness are we looking for? Third, I mean, we always talk about the change of our production model, promoting jobs, promoting industry, and so on. Are we really defining in Europe, and I'm not talking about European institutions, I'm talking about European society, European governance, European policymakers, and so on, in every level. Are we really promoting an industrial Europe ready to create jobs and to promote jobs, taking into account the energy policies we are putting on the table? And a final question, could be carbon price a common playground for everybody, a way to have more efficient and better policies for the future? Let me only say, Javier, that perhaps in Repsol we could have some advantages to cope with this debate that is not going to be easy for anybody. First of all, we are an integrated company. That means that we are learning for our clients every morning. So we know, when I talk about the perception of the clients, that is because I know the perception of our own clients, so we have to prepare ourselves for the future. We are trying to be a flexible and lean company to cope with these problems. And over the last 10 years, we have changed in a dramatic way to our portfolio. Now we are a more gassy company than an oil company. 65% or 67% of our current production is gas, is not oil. 75% of our current reserves are gassy. That means that we are preparing to be a part of this transition energy scenario. We have a strong presence in chemicals, lubricants, trading, and so on. So in areas that are not going to be in risk in coming decades because the CO2 concerns, because they are not CO2 they don't have CO2 emissions. And let me say that, I mean, we have shown as sector in the past that we are able to cope with technology, we are able to cope with innovation, and we are going to need all that to cope with the real challenges we have in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Josie John. A lot of questions, a lot of provocations, and I hope that during the debate we can clarify some of them. Gerasimo, I think it's your turn.
Thank you, Javier. Good morning. Thank you for USAID for inviting me. I put it, okay. Okay, good. So, and thank you all for being here today. I mean, it is a great pleasure. It's good timing because it's a few days before a lot of decisions and proposals will be put forward by the European Commission on the smart and clean energy package. It's obviously a bad timing because I cannot tell you everything, but Miguel Arias Cañete is coming here next Tuesday, so I'm sure he will tell more. But I think we have enough to discuss. And I think the timing is also very good because we're just very few weeks after the Paris Agreement and, let's say, the Marrakesh COP22. So the context is there. And I think everybody has agreed over the last, all the political forces in Europe and internationally agree on the direction of travel or where we want to go with climate change and to confront the challenge of climate change. And I think everybody is, across the world, is discussing what is the speed of this adjustment. So it's all about transition. And in this transition, we need good partnership between the policies and the private sector, the companies, the energy sector, and the citizens. And I think the presentation of Josie, it gives us a lot of optimism that we can have these partnerships in Europe, because we have a very strong energy sector who has vision, capacity to adapt, and capacity to engage in innovation. And I think that's what we need. So I could stop my speech here. It is about transition and how quickly and successfully we will be able to transit to a new situation, and we need a strong partnership. And we do not have the same partnership that we have in the energy sector in other sectors, because it is about transition in the digital business. It is about transition in the banking business, where I sort of have more background, and we do not have such a strong partnership as we have in the energy sector, both with the existing companies and with the new companies, because there will be newcomers. You have said that you don't know all your competitors, and it is true. There will be other competitors coming along. So now, to start the situation, my presentation will focus more on what we are doing in Europe within the context of, let's say, what is happening in the world. I think we have energy union is one of the big priorities of this Commission. we plan to, let's say, by next year, so in the first half of the Juncker Commission, we will finish all the actions that we think are necessary to put in place for the Energy Union. And the second half of the Juncker Commission, we will focus on implementation. And I think Energy Union goes hand in hand with, two elements mentioned as questions, with competitive economy, jobs and growth. It is part of our Energy Union agenda that we want to have a competitive energy. It is part of the Energy Union agenda that we want to have Energy Union together with jobs and growth, and it is possible. I will say why. We have, first of all, we have this double opportunity. We are decarbonizing and we can have economic growth. Is it possible? Yes. Over the last 2.5 decades, we have seen that in Europe, being a developed, let's say, continent, we have increased our GDP by 48% and we have halved our emissions. But it's not only about Europe. In the last International Energy Agency report, we could see that, we had the last 2 years having steady economic growth globally and a stable greenhouse gas emission. So there can be a decoupling of growth and from, let's say, emissions. This is possible. It has to be accelerated. It is possible in Europe. It is possible in the developing and emerging world. So that is very important. It puts the basis, the fundamentals for having a successful transition is there. What do we see in Europe? Energy efficiency. Can we save energy? Yes, we can save energy. We have saved over the last decade the equivalent of the energy needs of a country like Belgium. We saved 25 billion of our, let's say, import bill, not only because of the price of the oil price, separately from the prices of oil, we saved 25 billion a year because of energy saving measures. Are we going to create jobs and growth? About 400,000 jobs in Europe if we travel and exceed in our target 27%, 30% renewables, reduction on energy efficiency, etc. So our agenda creates jobs and growth in Europe, and this is part of the policy setting. Now, we need financing. Yes, when we need a lot of financing, more than 200 billion investment every year. We have put together a range of instruments to support financing. We have the European Structural Investment Funds, the structural funds. There are commitments to spend about 17 billion of euros on energy and overall 38 billion of euros on climate change actions from billion structural funds in Europe. We have put together the so-called Juncker with the proposals that are there, about 500 billion of financing. And of course, we have a substantial interest and necessity to partner this with the private sector investment. The number sounds big. The structural funds, the Juncker fund, they are not big. They are not enough. So again, here we need a partnership. We need to take this money from limited, given the challenge, limited money from the private resources, put them together with the money that we have from the EIB, let's say the Juncker plan, and partner it with the private sector in a successful way. This is possible if we look, let's say, and this transition is happening. If we look at the EIB lending on, let's say, in the end, 34% is renewables. developing and growing up every year. Networks, where we will need a lot of investment to changes, 30%. Energy efficiency, only 13%, a lot potential. So we need to accompany this change with financing, and financing and investment is part of every proposal that we make, including the one that we will make next week, where we will put a lot of emphasis on financing instruments and capacity to deal primarily with energy efficiency. Now, this package that we have, it's more, let's say, linked to what happens in these days. It's a package that is going to address 4 main areas. It's going to, let's say, we need these policies to accompany change, and we need some governance of the system, because we have targets for renewables, we have targets for energy efficiency, we have targets for greenhouse gas emissions, and we do not, we used to have national targets, and now we have a European target, so we need to govern the system. We need to make sure that the effort by the different member states is shared, is equitable, so we have what we call a governance system. What does it mean? That we need to have some reporting to see and have the capacity at the federal level to cross-check what every country is doing, what policies are followed, and have an instrument by which the ministers can discuss in the Council and the Parliament can discuss to see if we're going in the right direction. The whole discussion about this governing package is how descriptive and how detailed it's going to be. You can have very broad policies, or you can have plans. It is the same, and we believe that we need to have plans. We need to have operational plans that are reviewed by the different actors. Market design. Our traditional systems of capacity generations and, let's say, demand management are not adequate anymore. That is, they are not adequate to accompany this transition. We have, as it was said, a bit more time, but if we live and manage the system of electricity as it is, we will not do it. So we need, we have de facto a system that with renewables will be more variable. We will have more decentralized generation compared to the past, and these 2 factors have to be managed. And we believe that we need increasingly to deal with different demand. So how do you do it? How do you manage these changes? Well, we need to, in order to deal with a system that it is more variable, we need investment. We need investment in the grid, we need investment in the companies, and it cannot come only through the financing that I spoke before. We need the price signal in order, it's the fundamentals of the market that makes the system works differently. So when generation has to be priced according to the demand that it is there. And this will change the way the price signals are working in the market. Second, we need to have a more flexible demand. We need to give the possibility for the customers to adjust their needs, to the price. If we don't do that, theoretically it is possible, and engineering-wise it is possible, but it is very expensive. We need a huge backup capacity. If we want to have an electricity there for whenever, the consumer, wants to have it the way it is done today, then we will need to have huge backup capacity in order to compensate for the variable generation. So we need to work on this side to diminish the cost of backup capacity. We can do it in different ways, of course, and I will come to this by regional cooperation is one way to do it, but we have to do it. And last but not least, we need to empower the consumers to be more active participants. How do you do it? Primarily through technology and innovation. Empowering the consumers in the energy market is where energy union meets digital union. We have to move, we have the Internet of Things, for those of you who know the European jargon. We have to look on the Internet of Energy. So we need to get the technology who will manage this relationship and the engagement of consumers in this transition that we are going to have in order to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions and move, let's say, to change our energy system. Now, renewables. I presented renewables as being a fixed. It is there. It's going to be 27%. Now it's going to be 40%. It's going to be around half of our electricity production, by 2040, 2050. It is becoming mainstream. Renewables has started its presence in the market through basically priority access and through certain support. And the support in this area will not disappear overnight. It should not disappear overnight. It should be predictable. But it is true that when you have one source of generation to form close to 50% of your system, you cannot keep supporting it forever. So the whole package that we are bringing together is going to address this transformation, how priority access will decrease and how support schemes will be more transparent, more equal, and more based on competition going forward. So we cannot have the support or the priority access in the renewable markets that we had 10 years ago in the next 30 years. And therefore, our proposals and renewable energy next month, but also going forward, is going to manage these transitions in the renewable energy. At the same time, the support schemes will be needed for new technologies, because when I talk about renewables, it's about the mature technologies. Some of these technologies have become mature. We are already close to 15% of renewables. Europe-wide, in some countries it is more, and it's going to be 40%. It cannot be treated the same way as it is a startup technology. So this is going to be addressed. It has to be addressed. Otherwise, again, like the backup capacity is going to be too expensive. And we need more integrated markets. We cannot solve this transition looking also at a national level. We need to solve the issue of backup capacity, the issue of integration, and the issue of energy security through more regional integration. Now, this is the area where this energy union is a bit different than other unions, the banking union, the other unions that we have made, that we rely more on sub-regional solutions. It cannot be, we cannot do it across the 27 member states, but we will going to bring every country, every region into the system with some regional solutions, this we have to do it through integration. Interconnections are very important, not only to be built, but also to be used. And to be used, you do not need only to make, let's say, the connection. You need to have the right pricing signals, and you need to have the right demand management in order to use them. So it is firm in our agenda to end the isolation in policy and in infrastructure terms of specific countries, to bring them into regional groups and try to manage it from that perspective. I think these are the most important issues that I will highlight. I think it's good that I leave some time for questions, but we need to manage this change. We cannot manage, and we should not manage so fast that our sector cannot adapt. So I think the speed of change has to be set in partnership. We should not set the speed of change only from Brussels. It has to be in partnership, but we need partners that understand that there is a need for change, and then I think we have a successful model which not only will allow us to do this journey together well, but also it will allow us to export this model outside. So I'll stop there, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Gerasimos. Thank you very much for your presentation on behalf of of the work which is being done in the construction of the energy union. We have time for a discussion. Now, what I would like is for you to identify and try to put the question as short as possible so that we can have as many as possible. So we start from now. So who wants the floor? There.
José Ignacio Pradas from Ministry of Industry and Competitiveness, but I'm speaking at personal level now. What about distributed generation, the new model? I mean, I'm really disappointed about the speech of the representative of the Commission speaking about the empowerment of citizens. When you are speaking about empowering citizens and the commitment with technology, when you move about interconnections, you forget you are speaking about high voltage transmission. What about distributed generation, where the rationale, the full rationale and of the technologies can be implemented? And this removes all the power of natural monopolies. What about that?
Let's take another if it's... Okay, then they go ahead and we'll...
Yeah, I think there is a misunderstanding in the sense that I said that technology is one of our drivers and empowering the consumer is one of the drivers of our policy. And the decentralized system is one of the key issues defining the transition. So, by definition, renewables, being half of our electricity production, is something that will make the system differently. Smart grid, where we need to invest, is going to engage consumers and decrease the need for only a centralized generation system. But we are not going to, no studies that we have done and no impact assessments that we have done show that we will completely get rid of a certain need to have interconnection capacity between the countries and between base electricity. So things will not disappear, things will be transformed. What is coming in is the role of the prosumer who is producing and putting electricity into the grid at a local level. It is the role of the consumer who is managing its demand in a way by which it will allow the system to operate differently. The renewable sources of power generation are local, more local than the traditional ones. But so far, for the first part of the century, we do not see a situation where the rest of the 50% of the generation will be completely decentralized. So we have to marry these two things. And so far, if I want to travel to the end of the century, well, even there we do not see a situation that production will only be local. Because what do you have as low carbon technology for the end of the century if we eliminate completely fossil fuels by the end of the century, as it is said, and gas and all this? Well, science for the moment, the only thing that they propose is fusion, and this is centralized. So, you know, you have renewables, and the insurance policy to renewables in this very distant scenario is fusion. So, and this has other problems, but it doesn't solve this problem. So we cannot have a fully decentralized system. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A comment from the questions? I'm sorry, haven't heard you.
My name is Laszlo Varro. I'm the Chief Economist of the International Energy Agency. And I have a question to Mr. Imaz, that one important part of the Paris Agreement is mission innovation, a political commitment to significantly increase the resources for energy R&D and innovation. And I wonder that as a former scientist and an industry leader, what would be your advice to governments that if they put a significant effort to energy R&D, what should be the priority areas where this increased innovation effort should focus on?
Well, first of all, I think that we have to invest more in the private and in the public sector. of course. And in private companies, we have to focus on these areas where we add more value. So I'm not getting rid of a lot of things that are very important. I know that, for instance, the reduction of cost in some renewable energies like photovoltaic and so on is really important in electrification terms and so on. But from my point of view, where a company like Repsol could add more value than others in this transition to a world with a lower footprint in CO2 terms, let me put you an example. Some months ago, 10 energy companies, oil and gas companies that we represent more or less the 10% of the global production, we create an initiative that is called the Oil and Gas Climate Initiative. I mean, the target of this initiative is to say we want to have our own roadmap in order to reduce our CO2 footprint, and we are going to add our value in these areas in theoretical terms where we could be more efficient. 2 weeks ago in London, we created an investment vehicle, putting at the beginning $1 billion to promote research. I mean, it's open to work with startups, to invest in startups, to put money at risk, to promote research and so on. And we identified in our sector 3 main areas where we could put more value. The first one is energy efficiency. I mean, is, in my opinion, and I agreed with you, Gerasimo's expression that, I mean, saving energy is the most efficient way to reduce the CO2 print. Secondly, in our business, shifting from coal to gas. Let me tell you a paradox. Do you know which is the country that has reduced its CO2 emission level in a more dramatic way over the last 20 years? The United States. It's a country that didn't sign the Protocol of Kyoto, not even that, 15 years ago. Why? Because they're shifting from coal to gas, thanks to the unconventional. So, natural gas, shifting from coal to gas, is, in my opinion, one of the most important areas we could have in the future to reduce the footprint in CO2 terms. I mean, I can understand policies promoting countries like Germany, for instance, that appears as green in some issues, talking about electric vehicle and so on, and they are burning coal to produce electricity to feed this electric vehicle. So that is quite funny. But it's true that in natural gas terms, we could have additional problems in the unconventional. I'm not going to hide them, the methane leakage and so on. So we are ready to invest hardly, putting together capabilities of these companies to reduce the impact of methane coming from gas operations. And third issue that, let me say, I think that is not going to be here in efficient terms in 5, 6, 7, 10 years. But we need this technology from 2020, 2030, 2040 on if we see and analyze what is going to be the energy mix in the future. I'm talking about carbon capture, use, and storage. And that is my personal opinion, but I think that uses are going to be more important than capture and storage. Because today there are a real played and panoply of small companies, startups, research groups in the world researching in the use of CO2 to produce polymers, materials, advanced materials, and so on. So I think that it's a duty for oil and gas companies to invest hardly in this kind of technologies in order to reduce our own footprint. Of course, we have an additional issues where, in my opinion, it's very important to invest, but I think that it's very important that every company has to try to apply its own talent in this kind of processes where we could add an additional value. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Javier. My name is Konstantin Stasius. I'm from the European Network of Transmission System Operators, and I'll speak later on. But in response to Laszlo's questions and also the last 2 answers from Gerasimos and Mr. Imaz, in terms of R&D priorities, everything you said sounds really good, and I would support it, but I would add one word, and that's the system. In fact, I believe Europe already has the best organized, the most clearly defined continental power market and rules, and the best gas market and rules. Systems and cooperation among all the countries on the continent, that's our strength. And we're very far advanced compared to the rest of the world on how to make it all fit together. And by systems, I don't just mean the technical systems connecting the extra high voltage network. I also mean, referring to the question earlier, how the distributed generation, the demand response, the batteries, how all that does fit together with the centralized generation, with the big grids and the smaller distribution grids, and with the right market arrangements. And the European Commission, with the SET plan and the new European technology and innovation platforms, has recognized this very nicely. And there's a rather important ETIP, which I happen to chair, that's called the Smart Networks for Energy Transition, that's trying to put the system viewpoint into the foreground. Let's build on that strength.
Thank you very much.
I forgot an issue that, in my opinion, is also important, that is biofuels. And when I'm talking about biofuels, I'm talking about second-generation biofuels. We are there. We are trying to do our best investing there. Because let me say that I don't believe in first-generation biofuels. I think that use corn, use palm, use soy, and all that to supply fuel to a car. I mean, finally, in resources, in land, in human resources, in water and so on, we are competing with what we need to feed the world. And the owner of a SUV is going to have always more capacity to pay for the corn, let me say, than someone that needs this corn to feed her or his family. So, in my opinion, to use first-generation biofuels in an intensive way is a big mistake in terms of sustainability in the world. But our duty is to invest in the second generation. When I'm talking about second generation, I'm mainly talking about the use of lignocellulosic materials, mainly wood, biomass, and so on, to produce fuels.
Gerasimo, one question for you. But you have said that Energy Union is moving, that the package will be, the legislative part is just about to be finished, and therefore the implementation phase is coming in. Now, you said also that we need an integrated market, but regional solutions. But it's true that every country in the European Union has a starting point. I mean, today they have a mixture which is different one country for another, and very different some countries. Now, how do we handle that so that we don't waste time into transformations in countries which it will diminish the speed at which the union can be constructed? How do you have that in mind, these sub-regional solutions, an integrated market, coming from the reality that you have today in the different countries? Because we are not going to transfer. I mean, we don't coming from ex novo. We come from a country that is nuclear. The other is Denmark is more wind, etc. How do we do that? How do we do that? How is the plan to move that in a coordinated fashion and rapidly?
Yes, I think this is the most difficult part, how to move to reality, from the vision to reality, like in everything. Now, there are two ways. The way I picture it is I have said that we will do all the legislative parts in the first 2 years, and then we will try to push implementation forward. This, in my personal view, this statement hides two things. The first is that we cannot do too much only by legislation. So these limits, we do it for 2 years, not because we do for 2 years and then we finish and the world is perfect, but there are limits to what you can do with directives and legislative initiatives. And this first. The second is, whatever you can do, do it quickly and have some regulatory stability. Transition is very fast, and as you already know here in Spain, but everywhere, we are obliged to change the rules. The Energy Efficiency Directive is 5 years old. The Bubbling Buildings Directive is a few years old. So we are obliged to change rules fast, which is, so we better do certain things, change things, and then give time to adjust. And the second thing is we need this partnership with the private sector. If we do not have a partnership with energy companies, we will fail. Now, the element that has this, if we only work with governments, we will probably also will have a difficult time. I'm not allowed to say that we will fail, but I think if we only work with governments, I think it will not be enough. And that's where sort of the consumer comes in, the innovation comes in. We have to bring these actors that will challenge the current way of doing policy at national level, the current way that incumbent policies are doing things. And this third pillar is very important. We need to bring the consumer, the prosumer, whatever you call it, we have invented a lot of words, but we need to bring this force that will push the system. Otherwise, again, we cannot do this transition. So I think my vision is, we have a lot of difficulties, including in these coming weeks. Once the package is out, many governments and many ministers, they will come and they complain in one or the other way. We have problems in having regional solutions. Last year, because of when we started the Energy Union, the Russian crisis, the Ukraine crisis, the geopolitics pushed a lot of this idea of working together. And people are pushing back. We have problems of, agreeing on a regional solution in Central Europe between Germany, Poland, Czech Republic or so. We have problems here, the link of the Iberian Peninsula with the rest. But these are... Everybody agrees that this has to be handled, and we have to do it faster, and either by getting around the table the governance and banking the governments, let's say, to try to fight, but it's not enough. If the private sector is not a partner, the energy companies, and if the consumer does not demand this, it will not work. So I think I am personally convinced, not only because of the position that I have, but having seen how we have tried to move forward in other areas, that we need to work in the three areas together. And it's not through, let's say, legislation or infinite initiatives every year over the next 10 years from Brussels that we will do it. We need to create packages. We put things on the table. They will be debated by the Council, by the European Parliament. Some things that will be corrected, from the things that we are doing, are corrected through the process. So you have to have faith in this process, this democratic process, that things come out of the Commission, they are adjusted, and then we give time to the actors, to all actors, to play their role. So it's not going to be easy. It is a big challenge.
No, I know. Now, we have gone over time. We're going to stop here. Instead of 15 minutes, we'll have a shorter coffee break. And I'd like very much to thank both.
For. So the prices have gone down in these 3 years 43%. In that same period, we have had lower oil prices. Shale has remained viable even with an increase in production, even though the low prices. I mean, shale has gone from 3.2 million barrels in 2013 to 4.9 million barrels in 2016, after a peak of 5.3 million barrels in 2015, April. There has been so far no agreement to manage the supply of oil, contrary to what happened in 2009, where 4 million barrels were eliminated from the market in order for the price to go up. And 195 countries have signed the Paris Agreement. So things have changed tremendously in the last 3 years. And there are many comments in the press about whether we are facing a new normal, whether we are facing a new paradigm, whether oil prices are going to be lower for longer. So this is a huge debate right now in the industry. In the past, we had cycles. Every X number of years, there was a cycle, prices were going up, then prices were going down, but the paradigm of the industry was very clear and very stable. Saudi Arabia was the swing producer. Price normally fluctuated within certain bands. Demand was growing, and the main issue for the oil companies was to replace reserves. The industry players were known and predictable their behavior, and oil was a commodity. We have been working for many years with this paradigm, but is this paradigm changing? Well, let's go one by one. The first one, historically, the OPEC, and especially Saudi Arabia, was the one balancing the market. OPEC produces 43% of the oil in the world. US, including the shale oil, is 10%. And OPEC held 80% of the immediately available capacity that could be put into the market, the spare capacity, and Saudi Arabia typically represented 50% of that spare capacity. However, in November 2014, the decision was not to intervene in the market. So now the new debate is whether shale is going to be the new swing producer. And it is true that the key source of short-term swing supply has been the US shale producers. They have a very short project life, 2-3 years, and they have increasingly lowering the development costs. And then, for example, between 2014 and 2015, the break-even of the shale in the United States went down by $15. So they have a capacity of producing. And another important thing is that if you see on the graph on the right-hand side, you will see that there has been considerable volumes of drill, not in production wells, that can go into production very fast. Historically, the ratio between the DUC, drilled but uncompleted wells, to the completion was 2. In the last years, it has moved into 10 times that. So we have a lot of capacity that can go on stream very fast and therefore can affect the balance of supply and demand. So that's a big change. Saudi Arabia being the swing producer to a situation where shale may or may not be the swing producer. The second area is about boundaries for oil prices. And historically, the boundaries for oil prices were very clear. The first one was the price required to meet reinvestment economics. And that was around $75 per barrel, the cost of new exploration, of marginal exploration that was needed to be put on a stream in order to fulfill the demand. And, reality is that 19 million barrels needed to be added from yet to be developed fields by 2020 to cope with the current demand. That is 25% of the current production. So we have a need to invest, and the price had a floor based on which is the price of that new exploration. But there was also another price, another floor, that was the price required by the producing countries to balance their budgets. And that is a price that was affected a lot by the Arab Spring. After the Arab Spring, the price required to balance the budget went up. And obviously, I mean, depending on the country situation, you have different prices. But there was also a price whether, at which point it was clear that you needed to go up in order to have a stable situation in those countries. And there was a ceiling price that was the substitution between oil and gas. At very high oil prices, there was all the benefits of switching from oil to gas, especially in heavy truck transportation or in petrochemicals. So these were the ranges where, I mean, oil prices could fluctuate. There was also another floor price, who is the project cash cost. I mean, even though, I mean, there was a down limit around $75, obviously the prices could go even lower because the cash cost of producing oil can go as low as $40, but there are certain countries that can produce at even below $5. So there is no limit to how low can the oil prices go down. But now the situation is different. Now the situation is different because shale oil production has a higher elasticity due to the low break-even price they have. And at $60, we are right now in a situation where at $60, the economically viable reserves increase by 500%. And at $70 price, there are 15 years of production that will become available in the US. So the debate about the speed of which of these resources can be sustainably brought back on stream is an important one. And the result is that, as has already happened in the power sector with the impact of renewables, there is a very flexible supply curve. Depending on the oil price, the amount of shale that can be put on stream is going to vary, and that will affect in a big way the supply curve of the sector. So let's go to the next topic. In response to that situation, operators have cut investments in a very aggressive way. In the last 3 years, I mean, both international oil companies, independents, but also national oil companies have reduced their capex. I mean, Marathon cut in 2016 the capex by 50%, and Canada the same thing, Tullow. I mean, all the major companies are cutting their capex. And even some of them, because of the crisis and because of the problems they have, they are even borrowing money in order to be able to pay the dividends to their shareholders. So in that situation, the different countries are competing to attract investments, and the fiscal regimes need to be adapted for lower for longer. Between 2005 and 2008, and 2009, 2014, the taxation was increased, and as you can see in the graph, I mean, 53 countries increased government take because of taking advantage of the oil prices going up. But during the crisis in 2008 and 2009, they had to adjust and they had to bring incentives in order to attract investments. In a situation right now where, I mean, the economics of producing a field are changing, and in a situation where the companies are reducing their capex, there is going to be much more competition between countries in order to attract investments. And a good example is in the UK. I mean, in March 2016, they had to cut oil taxes by from 50 to 35%, just to make attractive the investments in the North Sea. So another important change in the situation of the sector. Another topic, demand. Historically, oil demand has been growing steadily and predictably. Normally, 1% annual growth through all the different and several economic cycles. Demand from 2002 to 2016 has increased 30%. And has shown very little elasticity to oil prices. But now the big debate is when we are going to see peak demand. And many sources see peak demand before 2013. And the debate around peak demand is going to be based very much on what are your estimations of different things. Electrical vehicle penetration, like Yosu Young was mentioning before, the substitution of fuel in power generation, the efficiency of internal combustion engines that continue to increase their efficiency and expected that they will increase their efficiency by 30%, or the different assumptions about the economic growth of the major consuming countries like China and India. Depending on your estimation of these, we can see different scenarios and where some people, for example, contemplate that by 2030 there could be a reduction in demand of 10% compared to the current situation. Another important point is the use of oil, and that's something that also Mr. Imad was mentioning before. I mean, historically, oil demand has been largely about transport applications. I mean, 43% of oil demand was road transportation. Going forward, the non-transport share is going to increase. It's going to continue to expand. From 2015 to 2040, petrochemical demands for oil will increase by 5 million barrels, as well as freight and as well as aviation, 3 million barrels each. So we are going to have a very different mix of the end markets for oil in the world. And one of the major drivers of that change is going to be what we believe is going to be the pace of penetration of electrical vehicles. And here again, we have very divergent views. We have some people, like the International Council of Clean Transportation, that foresees that by 2030 there will be a penetration of 50%. Others are talking about 12%. So there is a huge range of estimation. But in any case, I mean, just for your consideration, transforming, even though the number can be very big, transforming a car fleet takes 10 years. And therefore, it will take until 2035 to have at least 20% of electrical vehicle base in the world. And everything is also going to be very dependent on what's happening in China and India, because that is where the big amount of transportation of cars is going to be needed in the future. And currently, as you know, we only have 1.2 million electrical vehicles in the world. But this is going to be a major driver of the future demand and the future switch in the usages of oil. Another important topic is the future players in the oil industry. And José Young was mentioning before that he doesn't know which is going to be or which are going to be his competitors in the future. But there has been also a very important change in the stakeholders and the role of the stakeholders. I mean, the traditional players in the industry has been increased by a number of new players. We have regulators and governments that are exerting a greater influence and often changing the industry competitive dynamics. We have more and more activist investors, some of them frustrated by the industry declining returns. The return on capital employed in the industry has gone from 24% in 2006 to 5% in 2014. And that is making that there are activist investors trying to change the management of the companies. A very recent example is Elliott, a fund that is attacking a Marathon. Or the environmental groups that are putting pressure and are trying to push the companies to disclose their carbon risk, and they want a much more transparent reporting of the carbon situation of the different companies. So the landscape where oil companies are working is becoming more and more complex. We have more stakeholders with very different points of view, and the license to operate in the sector is become extremely difficult. In that situation, I mean, there are oil companies that are trying hard to be part of the solution. And one example is the one that has already been mentioned, the Oil and Gas Climate Initiative, composed by 11 oil companies that represents 20% of the production, that are committed to be part of the solution, and be part of the solution by increasing the share of natural gas in the global energy mix, reducing the methane emissions from flaring operations, improving the energy efficiency, and exploring long-term solutions like carbon capture and sequestration or renewables. And finally, my last point, just to finish, there are also differences in oil. I mean, oil is not not all oil is the same. There are big differences in terms of profitability and climate impact of different types of oils in the world. And therefore, if emissions are going to become important, the differences of emissions between different types of oil are going to be relevant going forward. So in the future, maybe we will be talking about I'm consuming Arab Light versus I am consuming Terra Nova or Ebony Light, because they have a very different carbon footprint. So we love that. What has been the reaction of the companies? And the companies need to be adopting to this paradigm change. They are focusing on value instead of volume. It's not anymore having more and more assets. It's about making sure that there are profitable assets. They are maintaining a very flexible CapEx base. They are focusing on short-cycle projects because they need to, as soon as possible, create cash in order to pay the dividends for the shareholders. There is a greater emphasis on resiliency, being available to work profitably at very low oil prices. And also they are looking for new sources of revenues like gas, renewables, or even they are re-entering again retail. That was an area that certain oil companies in the last year has been going out of that market. So we love that. The two key words for me of the industry right now are flexibility and resilience. And we need to be prepared for the unknown. The future, we don't know what it's going to be. What we know is that it's going to be very different, and we need to be prepared for whatever happens in the future. So definitely, I see that there is a paradigm change, that we are not in another phase of the cycle. We are facing a new paradigm of the industry. And understanding and acknowledging that new paradigm will be key if we want, or if the companies want to survive in the new world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ivan, for your talk. So Ivan has set the stage on the new paradigm, but we're going to focus now with Tim, among other things, on a new unknown we have out there called President-elect Trump, among other things. He will be focusing on the U.S. Elections and beyond.
So,
Tim.
yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks very much for having me. I was going to talk, say a few words about natural gas, which is my core research area. And then a rough estimate, 250-pound gorilla walked in the room, and I think that's something that we need to talk about too. So we'll say a few words about elections, and full disclosure, my guess is as good as any of these, as any of yours, because of course we know very little, and it's very early on to say with all too much certainty what will happen. So I'll say a few words about the elections, a few words about what it may mean, in particular in terms of the Paris Agreement. And then a few words about natural gas. So these are all small, concise, and straightforward topics that we'll address in the next couple of minutes. So maybe I should start with the elections. In essence, and I'm peeking over my shoulder every now and then to make sure that I'm at the right slide. The U.S. energy and climate policy entering uncharted territory. By that, I don't think I mean that we have not seen before that U.S. administrations came in that made energy and climate issue, or climate and environmental rules more broadly, probably more back burner issues. We've seen this before, of course, as you all remember. Bush Jr. Administration was not particularly keen on most environmental rules and regulations. Most of my friends in the environmental community shiver a little when they think back of those days. So not uncharted in that sense, but uncharted in another sense, and that's the America First part of Trump's proposal. If I were to characterize what President Obama has done over the last 8 years, it is a policy of essentially free trade with increasingly stringent environmental rules. That's basically how I would characterize it. What Mr. Trump has proposed is pretty much the opposite. So deregulating domestic energy production, so getting rid of these environmental rules as much as possible, and questioning free trade, questioning international trade. And I think one of the key questions is to what extent he'll be able in the coming years to actually implement that policy. And as we can further discuss, and we'll chat about in a minute, not all of that may be as straightforward as it may sound. On Twitter, it may look really good. In reality, it may be a little more complicated. But so uncharted territory indeed. So these are roughly the key building blocks that the Obama administration has been working on, in particular in the second term, I should add, of his presidency, where the emphasis was much more on environmental rules and building a climate legacy, if you will. The flagship program, we'll talk more about that, the Clean Power Plan, which sets emission standards for existing power plants and impacts roughly 1,000 electricity plants that are in place today throughout the US. In jeopardy, I think, and we'll talk more about what that may mean going forward, but I think a likely candidate of a plan, and it would be impactful, that would not survive the incoming administration because it is controversial among pretty much all Republicans, and because also it has huge symbolic value, obviously, as it was the flagship program. Rules that have been proposed but not finalized. So to give one example from this list, fuel economy standards that the Environmental Protection Agency has proposed for vehicles from 2025 and beyond are not finalized, and so unlikely that those rules that are not yet in place would actually make it through a next administration. And so that doesn't mean there will not be new fuel economy standards. In fact, there will, but likely less ambitious. That is something that I would anticipate. And then obviously some goals or targets, if you will, that may be much harder to realize. So reviving the coal industry is one of them. And as you may know, the job losses that we've seen from the 1980s onward in the mining industry in the US have very little to do with policy. In fact, they have to do with automation of mining processes, and they have a lot to do with competition. The free market that, in particular the Republicans like so much, cheap natural gas and renewables. And those have been the arch rivals, if you will, of coal, and likely something that I'm not sure Mr. Trump is going to address. So to look at two of these examples in a little bit more detail. So what you see here is a study was done, obviously, to assume that the Clean Power Plan would not survive, which, of course, it's still pending in court, and we don't even know if it would hold or if it would be considered federal overreach to begin with. But let us assume for a second that the new incoming administration will axe it altogether and say, we're not going to support this, and we don't want to do this. It's interesting to see what that means. So on the left, you see, without the Clean Power Plan, what the fuel mix would look like in the coming decades and how it would change. As you can see in gray, nuclear states roughly the same. Let's assume that nothing major changes there. You can see the differences on the right there's with the Clean Power Plan. And essentially, the main conclusion from this, I think, is that the trends don't change, but the trends are slowed down, right? So as you can see, without the Clean Power Plan, natural gas continues to grow, renewables continue to grow, and coal continues to decline. But as you can see on the right, with the Clean Power Plan, those processes are further exacerbated. So the market share of gas grows more significantly with the Clean Power Plan than without. And a little bit this applies to renewables as well. But so interesting to keep in mind that even if you axe this flagship program, the trends are not reversed, likely slowed down. So one other example that I wanted to talk about is federal support, if you will, for renewable technology. I think it's important first to stress that most of the incentives, think of renewable portfolio standards in some states, most of the incentives to invest in renewable energy actually at different levels of governance, states in particular, and sometimes even the local level. So that's important to keep in mind. That doesn't change with any new federal administration coming in. But there are two important instruments at the federal level, investment tax credit and production tax credit, that have been in place and have been a good incentive for investors in wind and solar power. But so you may be tempted to think, and some commentators have suggested, well, that's definitely something that the incoming Trump administration would get rid of. But take a look at where most of the benefits of those incentives actually go. This graph tells you where the majority of installed wind capacity, so onshore wind capacity today is. The top 6 states, 4 of those are Republican states, with actually number 1, Texas, has by far the most significant share of onshore wind capacity. So I'm not saying that a new administration would not go after some of these federal support mechanisms, but I would say or suggest that it is highly likely, if that happens, that there will be pushback within the Republican Party, because governors from Texas and Iowa and Kansas and Oklahoma, I think, would pick up the phone and call Washington and say, wait a minute, what are you doing here? We have a viable industry. These are a lot of jobs, and this is a lot of income, so we wouldn't be too excited. So that would be much more controversial to do. So this is to illustrate that it is not that straightforward that an incoming Trump administration would just undo pretty much everything that has been done to date. It could surely slow down trends, as I illustrated the Clean Power Plan. I don't want to underappreciate how significant that would be. It would be significant. But some of these things are more nuanced when you take a closer look. So the Paris Agreement, obviously, if you're, we don't really need this slide. You all know what the Paris Agreement is. And you also know, and we talked about this before, that Paris Agreement really can only be a starting point. And so important to keep in mind how challenging this process is. The stronger pledges, the darker blue line, if you will, illustrate where we would get if we would all stick to our promises. It tells you that it would get us roughly halfway of where we want to be if we are to make the 450 ppm target. So I think I put it in merely to emphasize how incredibly challenging this challenge is. And sometimes when I talk to friends back home, and it may be in other parts of Europe as well, I'm from the Netherlands originally, to be clear. I get the impression that people believe that we can make this transition swiftly in a decade or so. I don't think so. I think it's really, really challenging to get this done, and I think it can't be emphasized enough. Momentum, obviously, to build something after Paris was building. So, as you all know, the treaty was ratified much earlier than I think most people had anticipated. Became official by November 4th. There was an important agreement in the aviation sector where there was an agreement to curtail emissions there, one of the two sectors together with shipping that is not part of the Paris Agreement. So that was a big deal, I think in the same week or the week after. And then finally an amendment to the Montreal Protocol, certainly not insignificant, that further curtails the emission of HFCs, much more potent greenhouse gas than carbon, and something that is used in refrigerators and air conditioning systems, and that a lot of people were concerned about, as a couple of 100 million people in India, Pakistan, and others are becoming more wealthy and are interested in getting some of those appliances, making sure that they're not that we don't use HFCs in constructing them was critically important. So momentum was building, and then November 8th happened, and I think that was the talking point. I wasn't in Marrakesh, but I cannot imagine anything else, and that was the key talking point that everyone was worried about. What's going to happen now? There are reasons for hope. Let's hypothesize, because we don't know this, but let's hypothesize that the Trump administration says, you know what, we're actually going to make a point here, and I think at best we're not going to make an effort to push forward what we have agreed so far. We're just going to, I think at best we're going to just leave it be, and then we'll let the next administration pick it up. It could be much worse, right? There could be people in charge, and we have to wait and see who will be put in charge, and that will give us a better indication of what to expect. Who will say, we'll actually go after some of these policies and actually undo them. That's not unthinkable. Getting out of the Paris Agreement is challenging and takes time. Getting out of the UNFCCC, the founding document, is much more straightforward, can be done within a year. Something that an incoming president could do first day in office, send a letter to the UN office in New York and say, look, we're done with this. And then without a year, you'd be out. I'm not saying that will happen, but it can happen. And so I don't want to say, so I guess I want to say that we shouldn't rule that out per definition. Let's assume that for a second, then there are reasons for moderate hope, if you will. And I admittedly, I'm looking for needles here and there don't make it sound all too daunting. That's full disclosure. The scenario I just portrayed would obviously be devastating. But so, as I said, at the state level, a lot of relevant things and important things have happened and will continue to happen. And so states that have been progressive when it comes to renewable and efficiency policy, they will continue to do that. New York, California, Colorado, many others, they'll continue to make those efforts. The fight against pollution and air pollution in the developing countries, in particular in Asia, China and India, will continue. In fact, it will be even more important as air quality deteriorates further and further in those places. And so I have little reason to believe that will end. And who knows, if the US no longer wants to spur these efforts, then maybe others take over. I think there's And again, this is the positive outlook, but there is some reason to believe that for a country like China, this may actually be interesting to do. It has an imperative, a pragmatic imperative to make progress here, which is likely what it will do. But maybe it will say, look, we'll go the extra mile. There's a big strategic opportunity here. There's a lot of money to be made down the road in developing technology, making that globally available, and not just in China, but globally. And in the process, you get a nice diplomatic bonus. You make your rival, the US, look pretty bad, right? So actually, why not? It could be, and again, I'm just speculating now, but it could be that others take over that helm and start driving that process, and that would, of course, be good news. So the best news in light of all of this is obviously illustrated in these graphs, cost reductions for renewable technologies. And so despite the fact that there is likely a significant setback coming in terms of policy support from the within the world's largest emitter, this is the good news that we've seen most of the money flow actually to renewable technology investment, and that's likely going to continue because that is no longer spurred just by policy, but also because costs continue to fall, and that's what investors are certain, or more certain in, that they'll have a return down the road. So that's some good news in gloomy days, admittedly. So. Few words about global gas markets, because I think I have to stop, huh? Yeah, all right. So briefly, to build on what Mr. Imaz was saying earlier, obviously, and indeed maybe surprising to some, certainly in Northwestern Europe, carbon emissions reductions have been very significant in the United States, and it's largely because of this. Shale gas, which is and will not become uncontroversial. It is controversial in the United States as well, as you may know. There are, in fact, states that have banned shale gas extraction, like New York State. But overall, it's made a very significant contribution in terms of improving local air quality and reducing carbon emissions. And the resource base is huge. That's what this graph illustrates. Certainty that there are decades and decades of relatively competitive natural gas available. It raises a new set of questions, of course. As Mr. Imaz was saying, it is a great bridge fuel. Well, that bridge has been built in the United States. That's there. I think the next question is, where's the exit off that bridge? And that clearly is a set of questions that the U.S. administration, the current administration, was grappling with, that it hasn't answered yet. But think of reducing methane emissions as one shorter-term fix probably, but then using CCS and gas-fired electricity would be another. None of these are easy. I think most of these questions of how to reconcile the gas build-out with a low-carbon agenda are going to be back-burner issues in the next 4 years, and who knows, maybe even longer. But still, those are important questions that remain when you build a bridge with natural gas. So. Obviously, a lot of cheap natural gas has given an incentive for the construction of opportunities to export. I don't have a slide on pipeline capacity to Mexico, but that's by far the most significant build-out to date. But a number of liquefied natural gas plants, one in operation and a number under construction, and they'll come to market in the next 5 years or so. Contributing to a global glut that we expect to emerge, so oversupply in light of a lot of supply, not just in the US, but also in particular in Australia, coming to market, that combined with relatively modest demand growth, even though our assessments of a couple years ago were well, turns out they were a little too optimistic. There's significant growth, but not enough to meet supplies that are coming to market. So that's good news for importers. Relatively low prices, and it may spur the further integration, if you will, of regional gas markets globally. It is incentivizing a number of fundamental changes in the gas market that we can talk about more in a second, and that others may touch upon as well. But so a more global gas market, and that essentially I think would be good news. So that comes with geopolitical bonuses, if you will. So more optionality in Europe, in Central and Eastern Europe in particular, I think has generated some meaningful benefits. Additional LNG helps and creates options for those that are importing, so that's good news. And I think I will stop there. Thank you for your time. Thanks.
Thank you, Tim. Following first introduction to oil and gas, U.S., and finalizing with some natural gas, we have Tatiana Mitrova, who will be speaking on global gas and focusing now on another part of the world, Russia.
Oh, yeah. No, that's not my presentation. Yeah, okay. We've changed a little bit in order so that I will keep on the discussion about the global gas. Yeah, not yet. Okay, but anyway, just as an introduction, I would say, yeah, now it works. Oh, sorry, something went wrong. Okay. Should work better. So, we've heard about this story at the first panel, and Ivan also said about potential peak oil demand. Yeah, it's very hot topic on the agenda. It looks slightly different for gas. I mean, we do not see peak gas demand forthcoming, at least anytime soon. And here I'm showing some of the conclusions of the global and Russian energy outlook, which we were producing, but I would say that most of the think tanks and agencies engaged in focusing are giving similar figures. So gas demand is growing nearly everywhere. So even in OECD, as a total, it is growing, and the only region in the world where this trend is questioned is actually Europe. So elsewhere, gas is demanded more and more. And also differently from oil, remember when we were talking about oil supply, it is mainly unconventional oil. So we are peaking in conventional oil production, maybe now or 2020, very soon. With gas, it is different. So despite the fact that there is expanding production of unconventional gas, and Tim has just shown this amazing slide about unconventional shale gas in the US. Nevertheless, the main addition to the global gas production in the next 25 years, it will come from the conventional gas. So in this respect, gas market as usual is lagging behind the oil market for maybe 10, 15 years, who knows. But it is still an expanding market, a growing market, which creates a lot of opportunities globally. Once again, Europe in this respect looks more like an exemption rather than a traditional case. And we've seen also during the first panel this slide about the current split of the international gas trade between pipeline gas and LNG. And so far, pipeline gas is dominating. But what we see, first of all, and again, Tim was showing part of that, this amazing growth in the liquefaction capacities globally, and what is most important, that main part of these capacities are already under construction. So the investment decisions were made in the period of high oil prices and high gas prices. Maybe some of these decisions were not completely rational, as we can see now, but okay, these are sunk investments, so they cannot stop, they will finalize. We will have these capacities in the market, maybe with some delays, but still. And that means basically that this share of LNG in the global trade is expanding rather fast. So we know all these new LNG export projects, but we can name just few large, major new pipeline projects. And you know, all of them are facing lots of problems and discussions, and probably we will come back to that issue during our discussion. So what we see is actually LNG taking over at a certain period of time the global pipeline gas trade. You know, if we look at the oil market, it is rather diversified. There are several centers of production, several centers of consumption. Gas market, global gas market, there is no global gas market, just to begin with. So there is a set of regional gas markets. We do not have a single global gas price. We do not have this really converging price differentials. So we have North American gas market, which is living on its own. We have European gas market and basically Asian gas market. And what is happening, the US gas market suddenly became completely self-sufficient and moreover is becoming net exporter. European gas market, you see the projected import requirements, they are growing slightly for the very simple reason that the indigenous production is declining. Even with the flat demand, each year Europe needs slightly more gas. But these are really minor incremental additions. It's not a booming market, not an expanding need for additional imports. And basically it all turns to Asia, where Japan, again, with the nuclear restart and with the really significantly declining primary energy consumption, doesn't need that much additional supplies. So it's all about China, India, other emerging markets which are supposed to become the major target of all gas exporters. So very interesting situation that though the world is so big, actually the only market for gas seems to be somewhere in Asia. And it creates obviously a lot of competition and a lot of tension in this market, especially assuming all these investments. So some people put a lot of money in that and they want to have their returns sometime soon. So that's the picture, the global picture. And what about the role of the Russian Federation? Well, Russia traditionally used to be the largest gas exporter in the world, leaving far behind Qatar, Norway, Canada. So it was really dominating, it still is dominating this global gas trade. But frankly speaking, the last years were not really very successful. So since main part of the Russian gas exports is targeted to Europe, and we know quite a gloomy picture of the European gas consumption and gas imports, Russia had actually each year it was declining its gas production. And so mainly it was happening at the expense of Gazprom, which has export monopoly. So there is lower demand in the export market. Gazprom is producing less gas. And you see that this decline in exports, it couldn't be compensated even by slight increase of Asian supplies. So in 2009, Russia started delivering LNG from Sakhalin to Asian consumers, but nevertheless shrinking European supplies, and also look at these declining supplies to the former Soviet republics, which is understandable, first of all due to Ukraine. This is keeping Russian gas exports lower the historical heights of 2006, 2008. So we couldn't recover. Differently from oil, by the way, Russian oil exports are expanding very fast despite low oil prices, sanctions, and the fact that the market is really oversupplied. But with the gas, no demand, no supply growth. At the same time, Russia has actually occasionally created huge gas bubble domestically. So those who remember discussions of 2004, 2006 in EU-Russia gas relations, the main topic was, look, you are investing not sufficiently. There will be gas deficit in Europe. There is insufficient gas. So the main call on Russia was, guys, please go and invest. And they went. The decision to invest in Yamal Peninsula development, which is the northern part of Western Siberia, very severe region, -40, -50 degrees Celsius, permafrost, and many other interesting things. So the investments were made the investment decision was made in summer 2008. Right after that, market started to collapse, but it was already too late, again, sunk costs. And so they finalized these investments, and at the moment, Gazprom alone actually has approximately 150, 170 billion cubic meters of spare unutilized capacity. The investments were made both in the upstream development and in Bovanenkovo-Ukhta pipeline construction, so it's also a transportation system allowing to bring this gas to Europe, but suddenly it turned out that nobody needs this gas. And what is most important, that now the other gas producers, which are Novatek, Rosneft, and vertically integrated oil companies like Surgutneftegaz, Lukoil, they are also investing in their upstream development, both for oil production, where gas is like associated by product, and also for gas. Rosneft has its gas strategy, Novatek is clearly gas player. So all these investment decisions were done at the period of high oil prices. And now again, for them it makes more sense to finalize these projects rather than to stop them on 50%. So altogether, it is actually creating more than 250 billion cubic meters of excess production capacities by 2020 in Russia. And I mean, Russian domestic market, you can imagine, last year we had minus 4% GDP growth. This year it will be hopefully 0.5% GDP growth. It's not a situation when you can expect booming domestic gas demand. So domestic demand is fairly flat. There are no hopes that we will be able to expand supplies to CIS countries. In order to expand supplies to Asia, you know, there was this deal with China signed, Power of Siberia pipeline construction. But it takes like 5 years to build the pipeline and another 5 years to bring it to the full capacity. And altogether it will be 38 billion cubic meters, sorry, by 2022 approximately. While European exports, as you saw, are about 150 BCM. So it's uncomparable. It's impossible to replace European market or absorb this glut just by power of Siberia. Something has to be done. And obviously the pressure, the tensions between all these players are really increasing very strongly. Novatek and Rosneft are pressing on the government, lobbying to allow them to access pipeline exports to Europe. It is really becoming very, very tough fight, and you can imagine Rosneft and Gazprom, these are two really strong players with the direct access to the president and with a very strong set of arguments. So far, actually, Novatek and Rosneft managed to convince the government to provide them the right to export LNG. And Novatek is now finalizing Yamal LNG project, which is supposed to come on stream somewhere in the beginning of 2018. It is already like 70% completed. So there are really high chances that it will come in time. Rosneft had also LNG export plans together with ExxonMobil, but had to freeze all of them due to the sanctions. But nevertheless, it is not sufficient. They need pipeline access. They seek this pipeline access. It is a really big fight, and if at a certain point they will obtain this access, this could completely change the whole structure of Russian gas exports and could really affect very strongly the whole European gas market conjuncture. But so far there is no decision, and anyway it will not happen overnight. This is one of the most critical decisions for the Russian government, as you can imagine. Nobody is ready to take this risk, and there is a very complicated system of blocks and checks. Nobody wants to ruin this balance, so it will take some time. I wouldn't expect any big changes before the next elections, which are scheduled 2018. So most likely, if some fundamental market changes, market design changes in Russia will happen, it's somewhere about 2020. Meanwhile, Gazprom has this gas export monopoly. And how does it place in the European market? That's really a very interesting question. So if we look at the European gas demand and supply balance, we can see an amazing picture that actually Europeans have overcontracted. Nobody was expecting that consumption will go down so strongly. Right now, today, in 2016, the contracts cover 102% of the European gas demand. So that's a huge figure. Even if we forget about annual contractual quantities and look only at the take-or-pay volumes, which are like obligatory, you don't have any choice, you have to off-take them, it's already 75% of the European gas demand. That's a lot. So basically, the European market is locked in these long-term contracts, and there is very limited flexibility. So it's only this zone which arrives only post-2018, as some of the contracts will start to expire, and also depending on our demand projections. If we are looking at the low demand case, then this period moves somewhere beyond 2025. Yeah, but if we are more optimistic, then okay, 2018, 2020, there will arrive some new niche for new supplies. So basically, all this discussion about a future European desire to diversify its supply mix, to go for the US LNG supplies or any other sources of supply. Okay, that's a good idea, but legally, where can you fit it in? Because all these take-or-pay agreements, long-term contracts, they are usually signed under the auspice of intergovernmental agreements. They have very strong legal power, and believe me, they are very well protected in terms of all legal clauses. It's very difficult, it's impossible. So far, we didn't manage to find any example of termination of such a contract. So, so for Europe, that actually means that whether Europeans are happy with that or not, they are, how to say, doomed to cooperate with Russia. Because if we look at the portfolios of the individual players, the long-term contractual portfolios, look, Algerian contracts are expiring very fast. Norwegian contracts are expiring very fast. Qatar has huge flexibility, so they have nearly 50% take-or-pay and 50% over take-or-pay, and they are really, we can see that they are playing between different markets, making arbitration between Europe, Atlantic Basin and Pacific Basin. And only Russia, in this respect, has a very, very profound portfolio of these long-term contracts, which actually guarantees nearly similar supplies until 2021, 2022, whatever happens. So they can just relax and smoke and just do nothing. It is guaranteed legally. And of course, what they are doing, they are selling these volumes, and then on top of that, the Gazprom Marketing and Trading is acting rather actively at the spot market, selling another 20-25 billion cubic meters at the different, at TTF, at NBP. So altogether, that provides these 140, 150 billion cubic meters of supplies. But 120, they are just guaranteed. And so when we are talking about different ways how Europe could get rid of Russian gas and so on, first of all, it's necessary to keep in mind that there are legal obligations and it's really impossible to terminate them, and that there is very little room for this diversification in the next decade. So then, even post-2025, actually, I didn't show it on this slide, but the contracts, the Russian contracts are expiring very slowly. So when we are talking, it's one of the favorite topics, whether there will be price war in Europe, whether Russian gas will compete with the US LNG. Okay, they could compete, but only in this area. That's not too much. I mean, on the spot market, yeah, definitely. But the bulk of Russian gas will come under the long-term payment, under the long-term contracts in this zone. Of course, there will be some influence of the prices which are reflected at the spot market, and of course if there is oversupply of LNG, that will definitely drive spot prices down, and that will definitely force all Gazprom's customers to insist on contract renewals, and we saw it already. We've all experienced it in 2009, 2010, 2011. Basically Gazprom made a lot of revisions of its contracts, so with 50 customers each year they are revising their contracts altogether. Between 2008 and 2015, they've provided approximately 25% price discount compared to the good old oil indexed price indexation. But nevertheless, the positions are rather strong, and even if we look on these over take-or-pay volumes at this pure market competition, which is just a small segment of the European market, you can see that both at the long-run marginal cost basis or at the short-run marginal cost basis, Russian gas seems to be very competitive. So most of the US LNG exports is assessed on the short-run marginal cost basis, saying that, okay, liquefaction costs are already sunk. It is liquefy or pay agreement, basically, so you have to pay for liquefaction anyway, so forget about this cost and just look at the other parts, which are Henry Hub price and the transportation to Henry Hub, transportation of LNG and regas. But similarly, the sunk costs of upstream development and transportation network development, they are also sunk for the Russian gas as well. And you see that basically these two costs are nearly in the same range. So the differences depend mainly on the ruble to dollar exchange rate, which can be easily adjusted, actually, especially by the Russian government. Another ruble devaluation, which happens now each year, and we are again more competitive. So it's not that critical, and of course, for Russia, it's very important to protect its position on the European market, though I have to stress it's not about the money. So if you look at the structure of Russian budget revenues, it's approximately 30% coming now from the oil exports and only 4 to 5% from the gas exports. So it's not that critical for the budget, but it's of course critical for Gazprom itself as a commercial company, more or less, and it's critical for the international relationship. So, you know, EU-Russia gas relations are really very important, and they form the backbone of the whole political relation. So, summing up, if we look at the Russian gas story and Russia-EU relations in this respect, well, dominant position of Russian gas, and it's indeed dominant position, approximately 30% of the total European gas demand, they are granted by the existing long-term contracts, and that's the fact of life. Of course, EU wants to diversify, but actually, if we are looking at the different diversification options like Norway, which is not able to expand production further, and that's what Norwegians are saying, or North Africa, and you know all the problems with Algerian production or Egyptian LNG exports, so, or Libya, yeah. Southern corridor, so far the only success was the deal with Azerbaijan, but Shah Deniz 2, that's maximum. Again, Azerbaijan is not able to expand production domestically. So, frankly speaking, there is the only one additional source of supplies, which is LNG. Yeah, and it's not just the US LNG. I would rather say that for me, LNG from Qatar and from the other parts of the world seems to be more competitive in many cases. And well, theoretically, yes, we could see some sort of price war and price dampening on this smaller segment of competitive gas market in Europe, but that's definitely something Russia would prefer to avoid. So Russia wouldn't start this battle itself unless it is really very strongly pressed by the US, but I don't think that actually US producers are that much interested in going into further losses. Yeah, so I suppose that, of course, it will be driven by the conjuncture of the Asian market. Remember what I was showing in the very beginning. The biggest market is there. And every single decision of the Chinese government is much more important than any of the discussions between Gazprom or whoever else. So if Asia will require more gas supplies, all this LNG will, of course, move to Asia, and then European market wouldn't actually see that much of a competition. So I'll stop on that, and we'll be really happy to answer your questions later on. Thank you.
Okay, so our last presentation is by Mr. Varro. He will be talking about how the new, or how energy systems have and shall cope with the decarbonization efforts.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, several speakers already quoted IE analysis from our World Energy Outlook, which I'm, of course, happily agree with. So instead of repeating them, I'm going to talk to you about how do we see some of the energy security dilemmas in our decarbonizing energy system with focusing on Europe. And I would start with the observation that ever since the Paris Climate Summit, I had a bad feeling about what I would call the mission accomplished attitude. You know, this feeling that the great climate agreement is signed, the world is saved, we can all celebrate, relax, and go home. I think this is dangerously complacent. I think a much more appropriate mental image is that we made it to the base camp, and we had a brutal, tough climb ahead, a really deep and really significant challenge which is yet to come. And one hardly discussed aspect of that in Europe is the end of coal. This is the projections from our new policy scenario, which you could interpret as the political comfort zone, where European governments are not climate skeptic, they are doing something, but they don't go all the way. This is even in that trajectory, even with the current energy policies, coal is declining in Europe, coal plants are aging, the new environmental regulations are punishing, the weak electricity demand and renewables squeeze them out from the market. But in a 2 degrees trajectory where Europe goes all the way, you essentially wipe out coal in the next 10 years from the European energy system. Now, coal is the #1 source of carbon dioxide emissions, but coal also plays an important role in energy security. It is a dispatchable energy source running on a geopolitically secure primary fuel. Now, theoretically, you could envisage an energy transition in which you kick out dispatchable baseload coal plants from the system and replace it with dispatchable baseload low carbon generation. That's, in theory, that is possible. The technologies in theory exist. But in reality, I don't think we will have a nuclear renaissance in Europe. We might see a nuclear plant here and there being built, but the financial and political obstacles to nuclear power are formidable. I think with all due likelihood, the contribution of nuclear power in Europe will decline, even with a strong climate policy. I also don't think we will see a meaningful contribution of carbon capture and storage in the European energy system. We might see a pilot project here and there, but it's not going to play any significant role in a low-carbon European system, realistically. And last but not least, even within renewable technologies, the renewable technologies that are baseload, dispatchable, and reasonably easy to integrate into the power system, technologies like geothermal energy or concentrated solar power, they are not progressing well. And it's very difficult to see how we would see a revolutionary breakthrough in those technologies. We have a very, very rapid progress of wind and solar, the variable renewables, and with all likelihood, variable renewables, wind and solar are going to be the backbone of the new European energy system. However, when you move from a primarily dispatchable high carbon system to a variable renewable system, there are some non-trivial technical challenges because, you know, in a high carbon energy system, there is a reasonably straightforward technological solution to energy storage. You need a piece of land, a chain fence, and a guard dog, and you're done. That's the energy storage solution in a high carbon system. And from that, we move to a power system which will have to integrate very, very large shares of wind and solar power. Now there, what we call the software of the clean energy system, the ability of the electricity system to incorporate wind and solar is improving very rapidly. And I'm proud to praise here Spain, because I believe that Spain is one of the leading countries in the world in terms of the systematic application of big data and digital technologies into electricity system operation. I think what Spain achieved in terms of integrating wind and solar into the power system at very high shares is truly remarkable and something you can be proud of. However, when the question is how do we move from 75% to 85% instead of how do we move from 5% to 10%, then there are some unanswered questions. All the analysis of a low-carbon power system shows that demand-side response, making demand flexible, plays a potentially very important role. It's much easier and much cheaper to integrate wind and solar into a power system where demand is flexibly responding to market circumstances. It is clear, and that we have very clear evidence that there is a low-hanging fruit of demand-side response. Some countries like the United Kingdom or some regions like the Northeast United States had a very favorable experience mobilizing demand-side response in a cheap and efficient fashion, equivalent to a couple of % of peak demand. What we don't know is whether this low-hanging fruit is scalable. When we see cost-efficient demand-side response programs equivalent to 2%, does it mean that we can have 20? Or will we hit the wall somewhere? That is something we don't yet know, and making demand flexible is going to be a continuous challenge. Another open question is that the modeling analysis which describes how a close to 100% renewable system would work typically relies on assumptions of a very robust transmission development to transport huge quantities of renewable energy from Wyoming to California or from southern Spain to France, taking advantage of attractive geographical locations. But given the real-life experience with transmission development, where in practically every democratic society, in practically every transmission line is facing an intense social resistance from local communities, people hate high-voltage transmission lines, and in a democracy, they have a right to hate high-voltage transmission lines. So whether such a supergrid is politically feasible under democratic governance is something we don't yet know. And last but not least, electricity storage technology is improving, but we think that batteries with 4 wheels, otherwise we call them electric cars, are going to play a significantly bigger role than stationary batteries operated by utilities. And of course, in an ideal power system, electric car charging will be integrated into a smart grid, and the electric cars will charge when the wind is blowing strongly. However, there are some very powerful factors of consumer behavior and consumer convenience to overcome. When we observe the real-life utilization of the Tesla superchargers, the real-life utilization rate of the Tesla superchargers is 10%, and they operate in peak hours because this is when it is comfortable for the owner of the car. So whether smart grids and whether smart pricing signals can overcome the laziness of hundreds of millions of car drivers, that is again still an open question. So there is still work to be done to maintain electricity security in our decarbonizing power system. And perhaps the biggest challenge is the layout of the solar system. The most rapid, most disruptive technological improvements are with solar PV. But unfortunately, if you are around the 40th latitude, which would be New York, London, Paris, Beijing, Tokyo, so pretty important parts of the world economy, then you have on average 85% of your annual solar production between the middle of March and the middle of October. And this is not something that better technology will overcome, because this is how God created the solar system. Whereas electricity storage technology seems to be on track to solve the problem of the hourly variations of renewable production. Taking sunshine in July and using it in December is way, way beyond any electricity storage technology which is currently on the radar screen. So that would require some very different approach. So altogether, the wind and solar is going to be the backbone, but I should warn you that there is a somewhat annoying tendency to talk about renewable energy and decentralized energy as if the two were the same thing. The two are very, very different. Wind is significantly bigger than solar, and wind is not a decentralized energy resource. I mean, wind farms have sizes ranging from a couple of dozen to several hundred megawatts, which is the size of an average power plant. They rely on a centralized electricity network to deliver the electricity to the consumers. And the direction of innovation in wind turbine technology is that wind turbines keep getting bigger and bigger. So wind is actually getting less and less decentralized. Now, solar can be a decentralized energy resource, and it does play an important role in a decentralized fashion. But even in the case of solar, the significant majority of global solar deployment is large, ground-based, utility-scale solar projects. So your mental image of solar should not be a middle-class household putting solar panel on the rooftop. Your mental image of solar should be a piece of sunny and empty land in Arizona, in Rajasthan in India, or in Qinghai province in China, with rows and rows of solar panels as far as you can see. That's the reality of solar deployment, which again relies on an electricity network. Now, electricity networks became very hot investment properties in the past couple of years. So this is Red Electrica from Spain. The market capitalization doubled in the past 4 years. The same happened with National Grid in the United Kingdom or ITC Corporation in the United States. I think this very attractive valuation of the electricity network is a byproduct of quantitative easing, because as bond yields collapsed in a zero-interest rate environment, the fixed cash flow generated by the electricity network became very, very valuable for financial investors. However, this is financial engineering, this is not electrical engineering, because actual network investment is stagnating in Europe and it is stagnating in the United States. So while the financial valuation of network assets is incredibly attractive, there is no actual increase in physical network investment due to a long, long list of regulatory and licensing problems, and I think that might emerge as a significant energy security headache. So with all due likelihood, given the realistic prospects of electricity storage technology, we think that gas capacity will continue to play an indispensable role in managing electricity systems of high shares of renewables. But the role of that gas capacity will be fundamentally transformed. We move from a world which is today, Europe has around 210 gigawatts of gas capacity, generating somewhat less than 500 terawatt hours of electricity. And we think that as we kick out dispatchable coal capacity and we also close down a lot of baseload nuclear capacity, we will actually have to increase gas capacity into the system. So in a 2 degrees European system, we think that there will be a need for around 70 gigawatts more gas turbine capacity in the European system. But given that you operate those gas turbines only when the wind is not blowing and the sun is not shining, actual gas-fired power generation collapses to half the current level, and the average utilization of that gas turbine capacity is less than 1,000 hours a year. Now, you can envisage a microeconomics 101 perfect market in which electricity prices shoot up to 1,000 euro per megawatt hour in hours when the wind is not blowing and the sun is not shining, and the gas turbine investors make money only in those hours. But you have to be incredibly optimistic about microeconomics 101 perfect competition to believe in that. So I think with all due likelihood, the current electricity market design is not going to deliver that gas turbine capacity, which is going to be needed in the European system. So we think that the discussion about reforming electricity market design and making that capacity economically viable is a very legitimate part of the energy security discussion. Now, of course, when you operate these turbines, you also have to make a look at where they are located. The Lisbon Treaty contains an article that member states maintain national sovereignty over their energy mix, and we treat this principle as if it was an ancient freedom enshrined in the Magna Carta. So even today, when no European government would publicly admit that they don't trust their neighbors, but when you read the fine print of electricity security policies, it's very clear that those electricity security policies are based on the desire to maintain supply security on the basis of facilities in the national territory. Now, this is going to be an extremely expensive duplication in a low-carbon system. Europe can integrate very large quantities of wind and solar, but we need to harvest synergies in a continental scale. But once we harvest those synergies in a continental scale, European countries, individual countries, will lose their ability to keep the lights on a nation-state basis. So European governments will need to trust each other. And by the way, the most serious electricity security problem recently was Belgium. And in Belgium, that was almost exclusively managed through the interconnections and through French and Dutch and German electricity. So in real life, the single market actually delivers electricity security, but we need to reinforce the political trust in it, and we need to bring electricity security up to the regional and European level. Now, if we push renewables and energy efficiency to the level which is required for a 2 degrees climate stabilization, which is significantly beyond what current policies would deliver. But if we manage to achieve that renewable penetration and energy efficiency improvement, then with a bit of a simplification, we have enough renewable expansion and enough efficiency improvements to compensate for the decline of North Sea production and the decommissioning of coal, keeping European import needs unchanged. So there is a very large European gas import need even in the 2 degrees trajectory. European gas imports do not decline significantly in a 2 degrees trajectory. Now, in the past year or two, I often got the comment that why do we bother with gas supply security? We have American LNG coming and solves every problem. Now, American LNG is certainly a very good news, but if I look at the other news, they are not necessarily as good. As of today, we can conclude that we had 2 years of an utterly poisoned political relationship between Russia and Ukraine and an intense military conflict in eastern Ukraine, which had absolutely no impact on European gas supply. But this is, whether this is the judgment of history or whether this is a piece of luck, that we don't know. That we shall see in the future. And if I take the south of Europe, you can go from eastern Turkey to southern Algeria, and we have witnessed a series of major terrorist attacks on gas production and gas infrastructure facilities, leading to a not altogether reassuring supply security situation. So we will need new LNG sources in the European market. We are extremely lucky for American LNG to arrive, but this is not something which should be regarded as an automatic problem solver, solving all our challenges. Moreover, there is no automatic relationship between imports and energy security. You also need to maintain the flexibility of your energy system. And in a conventional energy system, a flexible substitution between coal and gas plays a critically important role. And here is an example from the United States, which is self-sufficient from gas and has limitless resources of domestic gas. But 2 years ago, during the polar vortex, the US energy system was actually pushed to the brink. It was a quite dangerous supply security situation. Gas demand was at a historical peak. The infrastructure was stretched, so gas-fired power generation could not increase. Now, wind was performing well. It was a very windy weather during the polar vortex, but I'm afraid there was not much solar production during these snowstorms. So altogether, 80% of the incremental generation during the polar vortex came from coal plants. And without those coal plants, it would have been very, very difficult to maintain supply security in the United States. Now, that doesn't mean that the problem is impossible to solve. You improve energy efficiency and you decrease the temperature sensitivity of demand. Wind performs well. You can have more investments in gas pipeline infrastructure. You can have more investments in gas storage. But you have to make the infrastructure more resilient if you want to compensate for the loss of flexibility. Another example of that is the post-Fukushima crisis management in Japan. Japan suddenly needed much more LNG after Fukushima, but nobody could actually produce more LNG. So this flexible LNG that Japan bought was not flexibility in the sense of Saudi Arabia suddenly ramping up oil production. Nobody could produce more LNG. Global LNG production stagnated for several years after Fukushima. So when Japan suddenly wanted to buy more LNG, somebody else had to buy less. And that somebody else was Europe. So ramping up the European coal plants, which coal-fired power generation increased in Europe in the 2 or 3 years after Fukushima, played actually a critically important role in keeping the lights on in Japan. But that was the last hurrah of the European coal. That was the end of the road. So as we move from a conventional energy system, which is flexible, price-driven substitution between coal and gas, into a low-carbon energy system dominated by wind, solar, and gas, where there is no price-driven substitution. Okay. When the wind is blowing, you don't use gas. You use wind at zero marginal cost. But when the wind is not blowing, you have to use gas at whatever gas market circumstances. So you lose price elasticity of demand, you lose demand-side flexibility in your electricity system. Consequently, you raise the bar of how much resilience the electricity and gas infrastructure will have to provide, and that requires some significant investments and some really smart regulation. And with that, I thank you for your attention, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
So we're running pretty late in time. Let's take perhaps.
Welcome to the last session of the day, and we're going back to Europe, to the Energy Union. And as always, I will try to mobilize the panel in two directions. First, to involve the audience, because so far it has been very one-side direction, to involve the audience. And second, to look at the challenges as opportunities, to have a positive look at it, not as a problem, but an opportunity for all the stakeholders. So to start on involving the audience, how many of you deem you are living in a smart home? Can you raise your hands? One. Okay, that's our home. Okay, so let's go a bit farther. How many of you deem you are living, not working, living in a smart building? Zero. How many of you are working in a smart building? You deem? One, two, three, a bit more. Four. I will not ask about smart cities, okay? So my point is, and that's a key message for Director General, is that I think that the transformation and evolution is definitely on its way on the supply side, on the grid side. I mean, the last auction of the Danish, it's 5 cents of a euro the kilowatt hour for offshore wind. But maybe we should not leave away the citizen, because if the whole value chain does not transform itself, then the whole transition will not happen. And the citizen is not reasoning in terms of rationality. He's not reasoning in terms of, oh, this technology is good. He's also reasoning in terms of emotionality. And we're forgetting this. And again, if we do not address the end-to-end, then we might fail in the whole thing. That's my first point of reflection, because individual reflection on each one of us. The second one is that we have seen this morning that if there is any place to be today and to be working on, is energy. I mean, it's evolution, revolution, transformation. You can use every word, but it's definitely a place full of opportunities. And just the 30 seconds of marketing. In the winter package that the Commission is going to issue next week, there is a communication layer that, well, they name energy twice. So they name energy, our company, twice, as one of the possible tools for enabling this change. And that's extremely good news. I think that what makes us a bit different is that, as the DG said this morning, because we are a public-private partnership. So we mobilize all the stakeholders to make transition a bit more easy. And we have brought today 3 of those stakeholders for the panel. The first one is ENTSO-E. ENTSO-E, what a strange name. Well, it's the grid that allows those centralized generation that we saw from the EIA speaker, that, hey, all the investment is going central. Still on renewables is going central. So it will allow that, hey, the demand is able, the load is able to transact. But there are also so many challenges. So when in 2030, we'll all have our new EVs, and we'll go to the sunny coast of Spain, suddenly the grid there, both the DSO and the TSO, will suffer big time. Suddenly 15 million EV vehicles trying to charge on the grid. And we definitely need them. So, Konstantin, the floor is yours. I will wave when 5 minutes are left so we can have time for questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Diego, for the kind introduction. In general, I'd be cautiously optimistic about where we're going, partly because the package is addressing the right questions, maybe not perfectly, but going in the right direction. Partly because the system is rather diverse. It's not just solar, it's also wind, it's also hydro, it's also many other things. And some of these are there in the winter. And partly because I strongly agree that the people are super important and need to become more engaged. Young people do seem to become more engaged, again in politics, but also in energy, and tech developing helps that, I think. So I want to talk about the system, about 3 global energy paradigm shifts that I'm pretty sure are happening. I want to talk about the market and the market design, and at the end, just a few words about research, development, and innovation that's very much needed still. Just very briefly, ENTSO-E covers all of Europe. It's a rather unusual association because it's mentioned in 4 different legal texts, European laws, with tasks that I'll get into in a moment. We go beyond the European Union into Southeastern Europe and cover a total of 35 countries. This picture I want to use partly to explain the challenges that you can see listed there. Stability gets challenged by fluctuating renewables. New connections are needed. The power flows are changing in general. They're much different from how they were a decade ago, but they also change from hour to hour. Integrating the demand-side resources, empowering consumers. How does this hang together between a super nice, quite well-functioning hourly wholesale market continent-wide and what the customers themselves are doing, house by house, commerce by commerce, deep down on 400 volts. But I also want to use this picture to remind ourselves why we're seeing these enormous capacity margins that we've been seeing in the Iberian Peninsula, in Germany, in Denmark, in Italy, UK, everywhere where renewables have come in already big time. It's to a large extent for the new ones that have come in recently and will continue to come in the future, the fluctuating ones, wind and solar, just because they're cheaper than the others or have less resource restrictions and limits like biomass and hydro might have. And wind and solar come in most parts of Europe at a quarter or less of capacity factors. Most of the time, they're not there, or at least not at full capacity. That's what Laszlo was mentioning already. Now, if you're trying to achieve then the 27% in energy, which we translate at 45 to 50% in electricity terawatt hours in the relatively near future of 2030, and you're doing much of this additional renewables with fluctuating relatively low capacity factor resources, you're trying to cover a lot of hours with resources that are not there for so many hours. That means on an annual basis, you got to have a lot of capacity built. And that's what's happened in Germany. That's what's happened even more in Portugal and Spain and elsewhere. You will have capacity margins that are not like 15 or 20% like in past years before the renewables came in. You'll have 100, 150, 200% margins. And that then means no matter whether this is distributed solar rooftops or whether it's the solar farms we've just seen on Laszlo's slides, or whether it's wind offshore, 1,000 megawatt wind parks, no matter whether it's decentralized or centralized. If the sun is shining, wind is blowing in a certain region, you'll have too much. And then you'll have three options: curtail, waste it; store it with the seasonal difficulties we've heard about; or transport it to a place where the value is higher than zero at the same time. And that's why we believe a strong grid and a smart grid is needed, and why we believe the continental scale of Europe is quite nice for that, and we'll probably need to go beyond that sooner or later. Of course, none of these by itself will be a solution, because again and again, the challenge, but also the nice part of electricity is it's a system with all kinds of components, all kinds of demands, all kinds of values of lost load for different customers, different applications, all kinds of supplies. The grid is a big component of the right answer, but not the only one. We're crossing our fingers that storage gets cheaper and that seasonal storage gets invented that isn't there yet at reasonable prices. So the strong grid we're developing all the time. I don't have time to dwell on it, but one of the legal mandates that ENTSO-E has is to every 2 years publish a 10-year network development plan. We've been doing that for the target year 2030 now for a few times. And we analyze hundreds of options. We try to be entirely open as to where they are. Even if there's no connection yet between two countries, with a big piece of sea in between, we analyze it. Is it worth it in an hourly simulation of market price differences to create with additional transmission capacity enough value to cover the cost? And then we compare it to the cost of an overhead line, and more we need to compare to the cost of a subterranean or subsea cable. And only those lines get built that saves the customer more money than they cost. So the strong grid is still important, but the smart grid on the other side of the graph is also more and more important. This is a picture from September 2016 in the country of Denmark. Lots of wind energy, and you can see that there's days on the weekend where the wind energy in the whole country, 5 million people, already exceeds the load. And in other countries, it'll be there soon. In Germany, probably we'll have quite a few days like that in the summer or the spring around the year 2020. And other countries will keep coming as Europe as a whole ramps up to this 45 to 50% energy in electricity from renewables. So the drivers are clear. There's politics, regulation, technology developing, as we've heard, solar prices, battery prices coming down, and markets developing. So again, the three paradigm shifts. Everything getting smarter, markets coming into everything, and climate protection, renewables coming into it, partly because of policies, partly because of their decreasing costs. These things, by the way, are playing not only in Europe, they're playing globally. For another presentation, I made a graph of how many smart meters there are on the different continents, on a continental scale. Asia, lots of them. America, North and South, lots of them. I tried to make a graph of how free the wholesale markets are on the different continents as a fraction of population. And Latin America, North America, Europe have lots of them, but Asia, Africa, also some. And of course, the solar photovoltaics have gotten cheaper, not just in Europe and not just in China, but everywhere. So those are global paradigm shifts that are driving this. And globally, everybody is struggling with predictable policies to integrate the renewables, to have a good market design, to enhance competition and empower the customer. Because if the solar panel and the batteries get cheaper, even if you have a vertically integrated monopoly somewhere in the world, many places in the world still, even if that may make sense macroeconomically because the system has too few megawatts to have CCGTs or coal-fired power plants from several competing producers in the market with a fair market outcome. Well, how do you deal with the solar rooftops that a private person is rich enough, happens to be rich enough to install, or that the village installs? How do you deal with that with respect to the natural monopoly big supplier? You need a grid code for sure. You begin to have competition. You need to have some sort of market rules one way or the other. And sometimes we bash ourselves in Europe, but I think our market rules are the cleanest in the whole world, certainly to cover 28 plus countries. But even if you just treat that as one big internal energy market with 530 million people, that's still pretty good rules we got. But there's deficiencies we need to address. And NSOE is trying to help do that. Of course, the transmission lines are just a service. They're the part that brings the supply and the demand together. Transmission lines alone don't make the world go around. They're just a part of the system. But that's where demand supply comes together. That's sort of the platform and the natural marketplace. And that's why transmission system operators have such a big part in actually making the market work. They cooperate, I'd say, more or less on a 50-50 basis in terms of influence methodology and so on with the power exchanges to optimize 85% of European terawatt hours used already today, every day for the 24-hour, 1-hour periods of the next day in an optimal algorithm so that all the congestion, all the markets, all the power plants, all the distributed generation is implicitly taken into account to have the right market prices in each country, or as we say it, in each price zone. So we're doing all of that in order to, first and foremost, have reliable, secure supply, to help protect the climate, to help integrate those renewables into the strong and smart grid, to help keep the bills as low as they can be. More renewables, relatively expensive still, although the price has come down, will not be truly lower bills, but the market will hopefully help keep the prices lower than they otherwise would be, and the smartness will help us too. So in terms of our priorities, we've written 850 pages of detailed rules in 8 different electricity network codes. They're all done. 7 of them have been approved by comitology and will become European regulations binding directly to every market participants themselves. Some of them to every homeowner because it's connection conditions for PV and demand-side response. One of them is in the process of being implemented, but even that one on market conditions, much still needs to be done. So the rules have advanced an awful lot. And in consensus, almost all of these were voted in comitologies unanimously or with really strong majorities of all the member states. And of course, with the Commission chairing it. But the effect in the market isn't quite there yet. This is honestly one of the reasons why I am cautiously optimistic, because I've seen all this stuff that was developed, argued about for years, that is now power of the law, and that will be implemented. The market will get better, even without the new market design package, and with it, hopefully, much better still. So what about this market design package? There is something amiss. We've heard it again and again. The gas-fired power plants are out of the money. The coal-fired power plants are perhaps even operating too much. We think we need those things on the left to get better, especially the ones in the middle. The dynamic pricing is for NSOE the linchpin that explains everything else here on this slide. We want to have every customer have the right to see a price that varies, certainly by time, and the time unit will come down from the hour towards 15 minutes or more, and by location. It varies by location already today with this wholesale market coupling I've described. Northern Norway has a different price than southern Norway, northern Sweden a different price from southern Sweden. In the distribution system, if electric cars come in, there will be time varying and location varying value of electricity too. We want the customers to see those. The sooner, the better. Of course, many customers will say, I don't care, because they don't have a smart home, they don't want to deal with it, it's not worth their time. Then they will get hedging products like the Spanish people have lots on offer. Many Spanish people are exposed to fluctuating prices. You can see it on your smartphone every day, Red Electrica app. But many of those, I think about half or so, are choosing a flat rate like everybody else in Europe has. Still, it's a customer choice thing, but the offer should be there to see this dynamic price, and I'm very happy that Spain is one of the forerunners on this aspect. If you have a very dynamic price, and if everything has gotten used to over 10 years or so to responding to it, we're far from it today, but because of the youth and the tech, I'm optimistic about it. Then eventually you might not need a capacity mechanism anymore. As long as that's not the case, we believe where things get tight, and they will be tight in France this winter, they might be tight in the UK this winter, they might be tight in Belgium this winter, a capacity mechanism is probably the only way forward. And then our main demand, apart from those adequacy-based, take the NSOE midterm adequacy forecast, base it all on that, have cross-border participation. But apart from that, when you design it such that the flexibility of the customers does not get hindered, but that it gets supported. Would get into too much detail to go into that. The only other point I have time to emphasize is that the market design package goes in the right direction. It addresses the right questions, but we're pretty worried it doesn't solve all the questions right, and that in the attempt to address so many questions coherently, there's a really strong danger that there'd be too much bureaucracy or even micromanagement. We need to really watch out for that. The ultimate goal is for the market to set the right incentives for investment and for usage. So this bureaucracy aspect needs to be watched as we discuss over the next year and a half what the Commission will hopefully publish in a week. The one concrete point where we had been hoping for more ambition was on policy regions. Different capacity mechanisms, different renewable support schemes can distort the market big time. And many people would say they are distorting the market big time. And that affects the regional market. Governments need to get together much better than in the past to talk this over with some basic rules that we were hoping this market design package would set. So in the end, we like the idea that there will be a market design package. We're looking forward to reading what it actually contains. We hope it will not be too bureaucratic. We hope it will allow for pragmatic bottom-up subsidiarity kind of development, in addition to setting some broad Europe-wide rules, and especially on a regional basis. But since it's pretty clear, we won't know yet how to avoid cannibalization of renewables investment in regions where there's already a high penetration rate, like Laszlo mentioned. There's continuing need for R&D, and the European Commission is addressing that quite nicely. There's a strong system component in the set plan, and I'm looking forward to that R&D also contributing to how the market will evolve, so that by 2030 we'll have the strong grid and the smart grid, and perhaps even no longer a need for capacity mechanisms at that time. Thank you very much for your attention.
Konstantin, thank you. One question before Carmen starts. Today, each country in Europe is deciding whether the grid operator should have or not storage on his own, or even a bit of generation on his own, just to fulfill your mission. What will be your one-sentence request that the TSOs should or could have that extra for fulfill your mission?
TSOs are market facilitators. That means they should generally not have control or ownership of storage. There can be very special conditions where the market doesn't get you the flexibility in the system that the storage could provide. This needs to be regulated if there are some conditions. Those would be exceptional.
Okay, thank you. So the second stakeholder is, you all know it because you are mostly Spaniards, but coming from outside, the beauty I see in gas natural is manifold. They are in gas, heat, electricity. They are the incumbent in some countries in the world. They are the challengers in others. They basically have like 100+ million customers, so they know also the retail side. In gas, they're also resource holder. So basically, they are in all the places in the value chain, in many different regulations. So for me, if I had to enter this transition with the backpack filled with tools, that is the company to be the successful one out. So putting the bar that high, Carmen, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I would like just to this is not my presentation. I have to wait. Yes, they are. Well, in any case, I can just give you the introduction. I am going to talk about, I would like just to give you a short background of the European Commission that will help us to understand why the Energy Union. And secondly, I just go directly to try to understand what does the Energy Union means. And just to finish with the challenges. What are the challenges for us, for my company? And of course, I will focus, it's right that my company has businesses also in Latin America, all over the world, but I will focus on European issues today, okay? I can do it with si queréis lo hago sin presentación, ¿eh? I am going to start. The first slide will have shown us the 5 priorities of the President Juncker, and you will see in number 2 is energy. 5 priorities, and number 2 is energy. I was really very happy not to have to talk about the trade agreement with the US. That was the 3rd priority. And the 5th priority was Brexit. So happy today about just talking about and focusing on energy. And so to understand that, and to do that, just doing that, President Juncker recognized that despite the huge advances that has been done, the huge improvements, that has been done during the last year, it was true that there is still room to improve and to have a real internal market, okay? So he's convinced, just doing that, he was convinced that having a market, a European market as a whole, it would be much better than having a coordinating national systems. So to do that, the Commission changed the structure. We have just in previous years, the structure of the Commission was just independent, well, more or less independent, different departments, different commissioners. But now, just to try to have some kind of coordination and a global view, President Juncker decided to establish some vice presidencies in order to coordinate these 5 priorities among the Commission. So in this sense, there are, thank you, in this sense, you could see the vice president of the Energy Union. So this is giving an important boost and And also the darker green are the different commissioners that are involved in energies. I mean, to understand and to identify that the Commissioner Cañete is involved in energy is quite easy, but it's not so evident or so easy to see how agriculture and rural development can be involved in energy. But they have a role, okay? And what did the European Commission? Well, the European Commission started working, started drafting documents. That is a thing that they do quite well. And just, it was in February 2015 when they launched the communication on the Energy Union with two important goals to achieve. Firstly, one, it was the climate and energy goals for the period 2020 to 2030. And the second, the completion of a real European internal market. This, to me, has two points of view. One, negative, because it's the recognition that the Commission has failed to reach an internal market. We have already 3 directives to reach the internal market, and this is a recognition that the work has not been finished yet. But on the other hand, it gives us a positive message. The positive message is that the Commission wants to have a real internal market, and they are going to, to do their best to have and to reach this goal. So with this communication, they announced the drafting, the future drafting, of course, at that moment, of these different actions that cover different areas related with energy. And we will see how this is going on. But the Commission was also aware of that doing this, having a global vision, a global European vision of the energy, needs also some coherence and collective response, needs a coherence and collective response. So, mainly because I think it's the first time that we have 2 objectives that have been set at a European level. I mean that I'm talking about efficiency and renewables target for 2020 and 30. And these targets have been set at a European level, so binding. They are binding targets. So you need some kind of instrument to try to encourage countries to reach these goals. And so the Commission announced the drafting of what is called the governance paper or communication. The communication that it will help to monitor how is the European Union doing on reaching these goals, and also will help to coordinate in different countries just with the aim to reaching this final goal. So, what are the challenges for utilities? What are the challenges for a company like my company? Well, the challenges are many, as you can guess. But I just decided to choose 3 of them. The first one is market design and renewables. The second one is the role of gas, and the third one, of course, is the climate change. And what has been seen as regarding these challenges in the recent months? Well, we have seen that the Commission is drafting a package, a big package. Somebody called the tsunami package, in Brussels the jumbo package, and in Spain the paquetón. It doesn't matter, because it's a huge package with more than 10 communication regulation directives. I mean, it's a revolution of the energy system. Directly, I mean, it will be directly to electricity world, but of course it will affect the rest of the energy system. So this package is expected for the end of November. I mean, very soon. And the question is, I mean, it will have more than 10 texts that it will be organized in 4 blocks: efficiency, electricity market design, efficiency, as I said before, renewables, and governance. What do we look forward to from this package? We have great expectations. Firstly, we would like to see a solution for wholesale market signals. I mean, we clearly know that as much energy with lower prices you put into the market, the prices of the wholesale market go down. If you say like this, you say, well, great for customers, great for people. But the problem is that there is no signal for new investments, that in Spain at the moment seems not to be very, very urgent. But what is worse is there isn't signals to remain in the system. Some technologies are not covering fixed costs. We are not talking about variable costs. So I cannot see why CRMs can distort markets. I don't see that, but probably we'll have an explanation. Because we are talking about rewarding a service that is needed. We have heard today that, I think it was Laszlo who said that gas plants, I don't want to focus on gas plants, but in any case, you need some backup capacity just in case the intermittent energies don't work. And this, unfortunately, happens. And maybe in the future, I'm sure in the future, we will have a good way to storage electricity. But the problem is that at the moment, there is not any good system. So we have just bear the risk of switch off the lights. It could be an option, of course, and in this sense, demand response, it could play a good role. Or, in any case, you need to have some kind of capacity, backup capacity, just in case renewables could not produce. What is the problem? Is that if you oblige some technologies to remain in the system, to provide this service, you must pay them. And these are CRMs. Of course, I understand the proposal of the Commission. They want some kind of rules to comply with the guidelines that were drafted by the DG COM, of course. But being said that, also DG COM recognized that energy-only markets, which mean that you just trust the prices of the wholesale market, and that's all, in practice don't work. That some kind of other instrument is needed. Of course, let me insist, just following some rules, but another instrument is needed. So, our second concern is gas, the role of gas, the role that gas could have in the future. I think that the gas is being the victim of the current situation. And when I say victim, because gas was supposed to play the role of providing the backup service to renewables due to is the less CO2 emitter fuel. But in practice, and due to the low, that ETS, that this is the CO2 prices signal, doesn't work. well, doesn't work, no, it's working, but it's not giving signal, because now, today, I think the price of CO2 is around €5 per ton of CO2. So, the role that is expected for the gas must be clarified, and also the European Union should try to resolve this paradoxical situation where we are talking about decarbonization, but we are burning gas more than ever. Well, more than ever during the recent years. So we need a clear signal and to change the merit order of the different technologies in the power generation. I would like just to try to comment about what my colleague, friend said about that the future is electric. Okay, it could be electric, and the European Commission said that in 2050 we have a clear goal. The question is, where is the future? I don't see, I mean, if we want to be economically efficient and we want to reach also the decarbonization goals, it's very complicated, very difficult to be electric, more electric in the short term. Why? Because if you, just an example, I try to, because I haven't prepared. If you change, for instance, gas that you have in your house, heater, gas for electricity, okay, I can introduce more renewables. But the problem is that people have a bad, people like to have a shower at 8 o'clock, I mean, in the evening, and to start cooking at this time, at least in my country. And this is the moment where we call the peak of demand. And the peak of demand normally is covered by thermal technologies. Even, you know that in Spain we have a lot of renewables, but at this moment of the day that everybody is just using energy in their houses, thermal technologies must to start working. Well, now these thermal plants are mainly from coal, but it means that if it is coal, you move from gas to more electrification, you could have more CO2 emissions. And in addition, you will need a reinforcement of grids, and so on and so on. So I know that Europe is a rich area. We are rich, and so, but I think waste money is bad. And we have in Spain a great experience, bad experience regarding the deficit of tariff some years ago. But it was bad for everybody, for the government, because he had to put on the table some hard measures, bad for the companies and bad for consumers. So just to finish, this was my last challenge. Of course, is climate and oh, sorry, this is, I don't know how that's, this is two parts of the, tiene como dos partes. Bueno, don't worry, this is very well known, es que se abría. Bueno, anyway, here are the 3 objectives that have been established by the European Commission for 20 and 30, and there are the ETS, the CO2 objectives have 2 parts, one ETS and one non-ETS. And just saying that Spain has been, established an objective of 26% of reduction for the non-ETS sectors, and that is not going to be easy to reach this goal. So some kind of flexibility maybe between ETS system and no-ETS system will help some countries to reach these goals. That's all. Just to finish, I can skip my conclusion, but because I said before, I don't want to take more time. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Carmen. So thank you, Carmen. Well, we put the next slides on the screen, please. One question for you. You are the Director of Regulatory and European Affairs. And Javier said just half an hour ago that we are all starting on different points of maturity towards the energy transition, but someday we will be there. And I guess that to have one regulator in Europe instead of 27 regulators could be a dream. So we'll not have a fragmented market, we will have a 400 million consumers market. Do you see that desirable? Any case is desirable? When? 2030, 2035?
Of course, I don't know the year. I mean, some kind of I mean, just to balance or to harmonization, it will be good. The problem is that normally, this is my personal point of view, normally the Iberian Peninsula is a bit forgotten in the European world, you know? And so I don't want to have a solution that fits mainly North European countries and just could damage Spain. Because in this case, I think in some aspect, Spain is different. It's true. I mean, and your country is different. So to have a unique regulator, it could be good. Of course, more integration probably is needed, but always taking care that, I mean, of our specificities, that are many,
Thank you. So next stakeholder is a lateral thinker. So I've seen a practitioner, a monopoly that is securing. Then we have seen a utility. And now we see somebody thinking laterally, so he's a think tank. And as this morning we heard, is about a lot of different animals now in the ecosystem. It's not about the traditional players. We need to have others. And to have somebody that does not have a vested interest in what exists today is extremely good. So we welcome Christian from CEPS. We all love acronyms. CEPS stands for Center for European Policy Studies. Christian, the floor is yours.
Okay, thanks a lot, Chairman. You started off with a good matter in the beginning. You asked the audience on something. So let me also do this, to do the interactive bit. Maybe up front we may run out of time. Who of you, and I'm particularly looking at the first row because these are the people, the experts, who of you know actually how much you pay for your electricity? So you do, you have to do it professionally, Gerasimus. You have to know this. Do you know how much you pay for your electricity? No. So I think, interesting, so much to the, to the consumer engagement in the energy union. I think there is some way to go. Now, when I prepared for this, I was having to take a bet. The last speaker, probably everything was said. So I thought to give a bit of a high-level sort of reflection on the energy union. And actually, as it turned out, it links very well to what Carmen said, taking some of the points further. Now, so when the energy union came about, there was a lot of, there are two scenarios, there are different views. First initial reaction in Brussels is always, this is old wine in new houses. That's the first thing. So is it just more of the same? And that was the initial reaction, and suddenly sort of we transited a bit to the other one. It might be a bit more. It is, and that's how we saw it, is a new consensus on the energy and climate challenges, and that consensus in a way has been broken down after the 2020 package in the time. So the Commission tried to put it up based on Tusk's ideas, but also the European Council, the 2014 European Council was already very formative in putting this. So what you can see it is a kind of an arbitrage between different parts of the EU, very diverse picture on climate change, markets, security, and of course needs of the periphery, I mean the geographical periphery. And Spain, Portugal were very active in the interconnector target and this kind of stuff. So there's a little bit of everything, and that I think is a very important element which came back many, many times, and it was mentioned several times. Spain is one of the countries, the decreasing number of countries where actually there is hope still, a lot of hope in European solutions. And I think it's a very peculiar, very important part that this high-level consensus, I think, is an important element. Now, what it also changed, it is a new branding. Suddenly, the European energy policy is not the internal energy market, which is a terrible animal. It is energy union. And, you know, from a branding exercise, it has been a fantastic success. And now it's a question of whether we can also make it work. So, was it, or is it more than a public relation exercise? There was initial enthusiasm, the new commission, and you know, for those who have been around Brussels at that time when the new commission came in, there was a huge banner saying, "This time is different." And you could see, that's my personal reaction, you could see there was a lot of attempt to make it different. There was a lot of pressure of integration, and there was a lot of pressure as well of you know, staying to the high-level part. And that is still ongoing. The first Energy Union communication, I think it was called the package, was a remarkably high commission, high-level commission document. And, you know, if I may say this, we are off the record or on the record, you know, I don't care. You know, it was one of the few actually readable European Commission documents on energy policy. And it was really putting all the elements together. And I think that was an important element in framing and putting it into a positive image. Now, the first time there was high-level political attention, and when we're hearing what people are saying today, we have a paradigm changes, lots of paradigm changes across the energy sectors, and we have a geopolitical upheavals. So I think it is more than justified to do something at this high level, bringing it all together. Now, the European Union tour by Commission Vice President, you know, there was a Vice President giving it also the institutional backup, I think was a very interesting and very useful exercise that everybody goes and talks to stakeholders as well and say, look, what is happening there? We would like to have this a bit of a different picture. Now there already I felt it a bit, we're falling back into the Commission sort of attitude. There was a lot of spin in it. You know, everything is nice, green and modern, and we make a lot of progress. You know, a little bit more criticism on the member states would have been welcome. But, you know, these are small matters. Now, the enthusiasm is decreasing. I mean, that's normal. Let's not overdo it. You know, there was a lot of pressure, a lot of activities, and then, of course, at some stage, people say, my God, there's no meeting without energy policy, energy union anymore, so it was too much. But also, of course, the energy union element was also hostage to the general EU malaise, if you want to call it like this. And, of course, the immigration issue has overshadowed everything. Now, the internal Commission organization was struggling with it, is struggling. I would not want to put this as a criticism. Integrate all these matters is very, very difficult. You know, we are 15 people in our team, you know, and, you know, at least once a week we realize we're not talking to each other. Huh? Now, just imagine what it is here, and, you know, in all your organization, you know how difficult it is. But there are good attempts doing this. And now, the third element, I think we should not underestimate it, a bit less here present. There is, of course, the EU reality that lots of member states want to find a national solution. And if member states go for national solutions, or at least national solutions, those solutions which fit their national interest, of course, it gets very, very different. Obviously, we are now in a different political situation. There's a package, trade-offs, alienation, you know, people don't like it. Obviously, there is a lot of discussion, acrinomy, which is a normal thing in the political process, so I wouldn't, you know, I think this is a normal development. Now, here, the last one is, Gerasimos told us now we have put you put up a package and now we let the markets or the stakeholders work on it. Now, I hope that Gerasimos believes himself and that we can also believe in this. This is really sort of the last salvo before we go into the higher level stuff again. I think that is really required. So, a number of achievements. I will do them very short. They come from my other events, from my other talk elements. Now, that's a strategic level. to put the energy at the strategic level is a very good thing. Energy is more than a market. It is a market, but is much more. And then the attention at this high political level was important. It is important for integration, for security, and here I talk very much about Central and Southeast Europe. The energy dimension is a big part of the EU coherence. If you don't solve it, there will be an issue there. The consensus on energy and climate will be very, very important if you want to move anywhere on digital banking union or whatever, because always these things then will be part of a package holding hostage for other agreements. So that, I think, is also an achievement. Their regional dimension is something new. The Commission has been really opposing any of these regional things. We have been, putting papers up in 2012 on this, and we never got a response, and suddenly in 2014 there was much more interest, and I think the CSEC, the gas connectivity group for Central and Southeast Europe, is one fantastic achievement. Suddenly we have a regional definition. The Bulgarians and the Romanians speak to each other, stakeholders in these countries. 3 years ago, that was not the case to that level. So it's a huge achievement. And then this recognition of the need for policy integration keeps going. And I think a very good example is the Commission's strategy paper or communication on transport. There was enormous pressure from the top to get these people talk to each other, knock their heads together, and I think it works quite well. It is a very, very interesting document, I should say. There is, again, strategically lined out what needs to be done, what are the problems, and not saying, yes, we have 100 recommendations to do this. No, it puts the questions square and fair. Challenges we are facing, of course, the EU treaty is what it is. And if the EU treaty say taxation and energy mix is national, it is national. And there is nothing you can put, so in the end, member states have a veto, and if they don't like it, they don't like it. And so it's a consensus building, slow, typical consensus building. The integration of the policies, it was alluded this morning, is a difficult one. Digital and energy, we are trying since many years to bring the two constituency together. It's not possible. They talk in different worlds, they talk about different things. Even energy and climate is very difficult. They have different journals, the academics, they have different models, and they just don't easily fit. Solidarity is, of course, a key element, currently in a bit of a short supply in the European Union. If we get to more consensus and solidarity, I guess it gets better. And the regionalization has more potential, but it was mentioned in the opening panel, how can we actually ensure that this regionalization doesn't get us, there and the other ones there, that we keep the tribe together. But I think there is a good attempt of doing this. Now let me just come to the second last slide to avoid that you're getting anxious. Now, there are opportunities, and I think what we have seen from the energy union discussion, there is the regional energy cooperation actually can, if properly done, foster resilience, integration, security, and supply. This is what the example of CSEC for Central and Southeast Europe, and I think it's a big success story. Now, the things are not perfect, but are much, much better than they were 5, 6, 7 years ago with in 2006 when there was the first gas supply crisis. Now, the national energy and climate plans, which are part of the energy union elements, and now they be codified in the new package, in the governance, they should, if properly done, and I fully agree with Gerasimus and others, there should be plans, they should be mandated, there should be templates and this kind of stuff. They will lay bare all the kind of fantasies member states put in energy demand, supply, and they will just realize that actually all the things they put together, they don't square. I could tell you lots of countries, they have plans, when you look at them, they are laughable. And if we keep going, the first, second, third iteration you will find of this, and I should be maybe also saying, maybe that you find also some skeleton in the Spanish plan. I would detect some of them. Now, But of course, the important part is really the high-level focus. After these packages, the two winter packages and the summer package, I think it's important now to really go back to that higher level, build this consensus, create this solidarity, etc., etc. Now, let me leave my last slide on this, and also we are here in a place where we discuss also global geopolitics, and Javier Solana is, of course, a person who has been spending a lot of his life on this. I think there's a huge opportunity beyond our concept. Now, of course, I'm from a think tank. I make life more complicated, bigger, and more integrated. Of course, it's a bit more difficult when you do it. But I think what we could do is have a global strategy, the EU global strategy on security or whatever, and EU a global strategy on energy. There's a couple of issues which also came out very, very nicely here in this. We should think a bit more, also in global terms, global geopolitics about an industrial strategy. Our industrial strategy in Energy Union is about how much free allocation do you give to the companies, and how low you can keep the CO2 price. I mean, that's our strategic, and then we see, yes, digital energy, it's all coming, but there's much more. Competitiveness is one element, but just imagine, we have in 20, 30, 40 years, if you are not totally wrong, we will have an international energy system where the power is based on technology and not of pipelines import. So a very, very different world. The power of nation states will not be defined by how much electricity or how much gas resources I have. There will be always resources, not want to overplay it, but the technology will be different, will be much, much more important. This is sort of the Silicon Valley story, not overplaying it, but this is an element. Then the Paris Agreement, it's still very much a discussion of these climate change people, and then there's a little bit of energy people say, yes, it has a big impact. The climate change agreement was 80% energy. 80% of this is energy. Now, there's lots of implications on development. If we take any of these plans serious, then the development of the development policy has to gear up and electrify and bring power, electricity or energy to the people. There are trade effects. The trade, there will be security and defense, but also big challenge for the European diplomacy. There will be lots of opportunities. I think the Paris Agreement has offered a lot of opportunities for new partnership of the EU. The Paris Agreement is the only framework I know of which actually, where all the countries of the world agree under one framework to do something. There's not many of them left, so that offers huge opportunities. Finally, I don't want to spend too much time on this. The security and energy nexus in Southeast Europe, there is a very, very important part. Some of you may know there was a recent poll, they are consistent. A country like Bulgaria, Bulgarians are asked, do you feel more comfortable with Russia than with the EU? And the Bulgarians say, half of them say, yes, we feel comfortable with the EU. The other says, we would rather feel more comfortable with Russia. So, there is different elements in this world, and I think we should also take this security element more serious. I finish here, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Christian. One question for you. In all the relations you have through your think tank with the different stakeholders, with the Commission, everybody, we have a worry from our side that is, Gerasimos said this morning, 200 billion per year to make the energy transition. 200 billion. Okay. The big investors of the past, so the utilities, we have seen their balance sheet shrinking in the last 5 years, big time. Write-offs by the billions, 7, 8 every year. So where is going to be the big money coming from? Because the Commission, the public money is just a catalyzer, but then you need the big money. So to make this energy transition, have you felt that as a concern in your talks with the stakeholders? Is just something waived, or?
I would say it's the biggest concern. I mean, let's just be realistic. Where will that money come from? It will come from Silicon Valley. You know, I mean, Apple has 250 billion sitting, and they could buy the Deutsche Bank, which has about 30, 40 billion market capitalization. They wouldn't touch it because it's just not worth it. Right? You know, our utilities are decapitalized. I mean, the biggest ones in Germany and others, there is not much money left in there. And if you look at the remuneration of the utilities, it will not get better. The remuneration will just coming from subsidies, more or less. There is no capital left in the, maybe in oil and gas is different, but in the electricity part, there's no capital left to invest and also to take these risks, because some of these models will just fail, and then you lose sort of 30, 40 billion, or I mean 10 or 20, whatever.
Thank you. One question from the floor, and then we close the session, and we can keep on mingling with good Spanish red wine and jamón. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, there.
Related to this question, don't you think that this lack of trust comes from uncertainty? All this regulatory framework, there are two models colliding. The decentralized generation, which is based on smart grids. I have to admit, I have to say that the high voltage transmission lines are very smart, so there is little room for them to be smarter. There is room, but it's less room than at the low voltage, and particularly when you mention smart homes, and this is real smart grid eventually. It's when the prosumer and the consumer is empowered. Don't you think that these are two models colliding, and this is why it's so difficult for the utilities to justify before the stakeholders and the stakeholders the level of investment required for this revolution we are envisioning?
Well, that's why it would be so nice if the market could drive the investments. And on where the money comes from, I have a slightly more optimistic picture, because if we look at where most of the money is going, and Laszlo's slides showed that quite nicely, it's going into investments in renewable energy. And the vast majority of these are driven by subsidies that are less coming from the state's coffers or tax receipts, and that are much more coming from the electricity customers' pockets. Now, this has to be optimized, and I'm fully with Carmen that we don't have money to waste here. And if gas can do many, many things for decades to come, significantly cheaper parts of the market, then yes, the market will hopefully lead to a situation where gas-fired power plants are in the money and not out of the money, and where the investment incentives are just right. Whatever that means. You don't know it, I don't know it today, but the market should be left to work. But in the end, the value of each consumed kilowatt hour to the customer, whether it's in industry, commerce, or at home, is so much higher than what we pay today. The money should be there, if only the regulatory conditions are right for it. And that's why we're arguing about the precise way of charging the customer for these subsidies. There's enormous efficiency potential just in how we charge them for it. Does the customer really have to pay the same amount for each kilowatt hour he uses? For the subsidies of solar PV that happened 5 or 10 years ago, is every kilowatt hour really the same? Don't we have a smarter way to do that? So there's enormous ways to improve the efficiency with how we collect this money. But in principle, because electricity is such a fantastic thing, in a village in Africa and in downtown Madrid, the money should be there if it's regulated right.
A microphone, please. No, he's come.
I think that both this panel was very interesting, because it put together the different elements of the recipe going forward. Carmen's presentation said that there are too many elements for the recipe are probably coming at the same time. But I think we can debate if they can be split or so. But the key elements are there. We will be there in the next few months. I think it's, Christian said very clearly that once you put the elements for the cooking on the table, there will be some, grabbing for issues. So I think we are going to expect in the short term a difficult situation, national interest re-emerging, etc. And I think we will have to deal with that. And when I say implementation in the Commission, we have to do our job, the Council, the going around, ministers, companies, stakeholders. But I think we need also not to be prisoners. The presentations have shown this in the previous panel. We cannot be prisoners for the short term, the next 10 years. Gentleman here said that, we will have Trump, but in any way, whatever happens, the policy after 4 years, the direction is there. We were told here that over the next 10 years on gas, you cannot do nothing. There are these contracts. Well, we will have after 10 years, So, and then see the price war after, and then I see how Gazprom will find the export markets. So we need to, let's say, build a longer-term vision. It's necessary. And I think we need to continue on the things that very nicely Christian suggested that we are doing well. We have a couple of good regional integration areas, and I think it would be useful if what we can do more beyond CESEC and BEMIP. And I think the other thing that we have to do, we have integrated well the transport sector. I said the digital sector, you are doubtful, but which are the area, except for the marriage with the digital union that we can do. Personally, I think all the elements are there to have a marriage of energy union with industrial policy. We are doing a lot of standardization in order to move up, industrialize the process. We have to standardize the smart meters. The innovation, it's not enough by itself. It has to be industrialized. So once we get smart meters, they have to be standardized everywhere. We have to think laterally. Consumers are reluctant. Some of the IIA said that they are reluctant to be active in energy market. Yes, they are active, but consumers are becoming active in using technology in cars. Beyond phones, they are being hit by the need to use technology in other areas. So there is room for having, let's say, them actively engaged, and it's up to us to put the conditions in place. But I would be happy to hear in which other partnerships you believe as stakeholders for Energy Union.
So now it's time to close the session. So I invite Javier. I thank the panel again. So from my side, two comments before Javier comes on stage wired. Thank you. Also, to end up, I think you will get the microphone. To end up also on a positive note from my side, last week I was like everybody or some of in the audience in Marrakesh in the COP22. The COP22 was normally the COP of the action, whereas Paris was about the agreement. And my debrief is 3 messages. Number 1 is everybody, no matter which country they came from, no matter which function the value chain they are from, they had the big picture, the joint big picture in their talk, in their emotions. And that's an incredible force for everybody to move. We don't know, it will be curvy, but we know where we all want to go. Number 2, the message is that people were not talking about the if we should do this. Everybody was talking about the how. And that was extremely, extremely rewarding. You saw a lot of businesses talking about the how, not about the if. And that was extremely good. And number 3, you could see children and kids walking around. So the ones that will be sitting here in 20 years' time, that will be the practitioners of the change. And that's an incredible hope for the whole thing. I will stop on this.
Well, thank you very much. I don't think we have to extract conclusions out of this. I think the conclusions may be different from different people because they haven't listened with more attention a particular part of the conversation that we have had. But I think on the general terms, on the general topic, we have to get in our minds that we are in a time of transition. It's a time of transition which is not going to be short. It's going to be, if not very long, at least long. And that will require great attention not to make mistakes in the transitional part. So we have to have a good line at the end of the tunnel and try to navigate through the transition period without making mistakes that avoid or prevent that you arrive to where we want to arrive. And I think that globally we want to arrive to a world in which the energy is in a stable input, that the cooperation among the big players is constructive, and that is our aim at the long term. And my concern now is more at the European level, because it is true that it's a big work being done today. I mean, and Wednesday we will have more. But this idea that we have such a fragmented beginning, countries which are so different initially from each other, that the process of convergence is going to be more difficult. Therefore, we have to define what do we mean with convergence and try to get the convergence which is possible and try to obtain that. And I think that this combination between the regional and sub-regional efforts, I think that combination has to be the optimal one, is the one we have to find. Not to let the limitations take over, but try to get as much as possible a combination of optimal relationship between regional and European, so regional and European. Now, a word about the United States. I think that when we are talking about a transitional period that goes beyond the mandate of a president of the United States, we may have today a complicated moment that, again, if nothing impossible to change is done, we have a problem. Probably more later we may have something which a better output from the United States. Now, the second thing I would like to say is China. I mean, think for a moment what happened in the last meeting of IPEC. It was a few days ago, and President Obama went there, and the only thing he could say is goodbye. It's been a pleasure to be with you, but goodbye. I cannot let you anything behind, because the Trans-Pacific Agreement is not going to be done. The other cooperation, pivoting or something, is not going to be done. And thank you very much for this journey that we have done together, but I'm sorry, I cannot offer anything. And silence. But then 10 minutes later, somebody raised their hand and said, well, I want to take the lead. Why don't we do it with us? We are ready to try to construct a partnership on trade. It will be different. Maybe the United States are not there, but the Chinese will be there. And when you see Xi Jinping raise the hand 10 minutes after Obama said goodbye and said, well, before we part, please, I am ready. If you don't want to do the free trade agreements, I am ready to do that. I mean, to try to get to get the people together to work in that direction. This is a very dramatic moment, I think, when you see that, because that it makes everybody happy, even the Europeans, because if that is the case, we can do and finalize a trade agreement with Japan. So this is a very complicated moment. And when you say that about the PTT, you can say the same about cooperation on energy and cooperation on climate change. And imagine that we begin to see a slowness into the motion into Paris. And it's a moment in which the Chinese decided that for them now it's much more interesting to move forward. And it gets the rest of us with the change, the past a little bit not in sync. Now, that's what we have to prevent, that we get now in a moment in which we lose the sync and the emerging countries led by China gets out in a different sync. This is not 100% possible because President Xi has problems also at home. But part of the solution of the problems at home, and you suppose you are a leader of China today, the last thing you want to have is social problems. And pollution is a source of social problems. So to fight against pollution in the big cities is, somebody said last night, I don't know who, I was talking to somebody last night, to try to stabilize the society is fundamental not to have too much pollution. I mean, you go to China today, to the capital, and you see it's not a comfortable place to live. And that is known by the foreigners, but it's known also by every Chinese that lives there. And a catalyzer of doing politics means complain about the government, may be a very attractive one and easy to construct. Is a consensus about climate, and therefore the response of the leadership has to be to do that. So maybe we will see things we don't expect. We expect it politically from us, but maybe politically from China. And so this is part of the transition in which we are living. And this is basically because we used to have cooperating among the big powers, cooperating for a long time, or for some time after the Berlin Wall fell, we had a period of time of cooperation among the big powers. And that is broken. And we have to see what is the new, at what level we can recuperate the cooperation instead of the confrontation. And that for me is the most interesting, geopolitically, is the most interesting feature that we have today. And with the election of President Trump, we will go probably through a period of time of more competition than cooperation. But let's hope that that is a short period of time, and the competition versus cooperation, and we come back to a cooperation, convivial cooperation, because I think that the problems continue to be global. The solutions have to be global, and therefore, like it or not, we need the institutions which can bring the problem to the solutions. So the global institutions are a must, and maybe we have to change the structure of some of them, be more fair in distribution of voting rights, etc., but it's necessary to have them. It's absolutely necessary to maintain them. Multilateralism is a must. It may be at a slower pace in the coming years, but it is a must. We cannot go back on that direction that we have taken already. So thank you very much for all the interventions. I would like to maintain this, if possible, yearly, get a networking of people in Europe and beyond Europe. We continue to be thinking about these issues in a focused manner. I think we don't have time for dilettantism. We have time to really think with a focused direction, a focalized direction, and work hard. Well, this is a happy ending, and we have to work hard, which is what we want to do, work hard for the better of this world in which we are living, which is a fascinating place, but it's complicated. And we have to be more fascinated than pessimistic because of the complications. Fascinated by the beauty more than sad because of the difficulties. Okay, thank you very, very much. Thank you to the Bertelsmann Foundation, which give us this place.